Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Scion Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Deku had Persona Mutation Quirk? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was nighttime, and yet it was oddly warm as Izuku walked up the dirt mountain path. The sun had gone down hours ago, but the heat lingered, making him sweat more with every step. It really didn't help to soothe the stinging mark on his cheek, either. Mom hadn't been happy to hear that his grades had dipped yet again, and there's no way she would have believed that the teachers were harsher on him. She always just thought he was the worst child, the weaker child, the one destined to be nothing in comparison to his brother. So that's why his face stung, and partly why he was trudging up this mountain in the dead of night. Kaken was the other reason, of course, but his insults and violence weren't enough on their own to lead Izuku to take this trip. He looked up at the moon, glowing brightly ahead of him. He was already halfway up the slope, so he was making good time. Not like anyone was going to come look for him, but he'd rather get this over with quickly. It would be better for everyone if he could only stop being a coward and jump. No one wanted him around anyways. He had decided a couple days ago that the cliffs near his home would be a good place to kill himself, but he hadn't mustered up the courage until now. He could have just hung himself, but he was too afraid of death hurting to go that route. He also didn't have access to any guns, and a knife would hurt all the same. The only reason he was taking the trek up this cliff at all was because he couldn't get access to the roof of a building high enough to die on impact. All the ones he checked were locked. And so, the cliff was the best course of action. He just had to hope the underbrush didn't cushion the fall. This walk sure is long. And hot. It's about now that Izuku lamented not bringing anything to drink. He wasn't expecting to come back from this, but some water would be nice right about now. He was nearing the top of the mountain now. Maybe mountain was exaggerating a bit, now that he thought about it. It had been a while since his last visit, so it felt a lot more daunting then, but it was just a big cliff. Made for a nice lookout, maybe somewhere to sit with someone you love and look out at the city. Not that he had anyone like that. Not since the diagnosis. At least the soft melody drifting along the wind gave the place a good ambience for his death. Izuku stopped close to the lookout and glanced around. The people who owned the cliff didn't let anyone come in with electronics. Said it ruined the experience, or something. It's why he left his phone at home for the night. Even if the guard in front of the gate had gone home for the night, he didn't want to break the rules, since he didn't want to mess anything else up for someone else tonight. But he could still hear music coming from further up the path. It was almost hypnotic, and he couldn't help but walk quietly towards the outcropping, just to know what was happening. As he reached the source, he stopped in place, ducking behind a tree. There really was someone here. It was a woman, tall with dark black hair and two horns, although one of them was broken. Her clothes were odd, enough to make Izuku think she might be a pro, but he would have recognized her if so. He knew every hero around Muzutafu and then some, even the ones that only came out at night. Maybe him going out so late was the reason his grades were dropping? Maybe if he stopped watching heroes every night, Mom wouldn't hit him as hard. Her voice snapped him back to reality. Yeah, there was someone he didn't recognize, but more importantly, there was someone here. What awful timing, he'd have to wait for her to leave, and he'd just have to sit and hide, absorbed in his thoughts. He was hoping to get this over with quickly so there wouldn't be any time to doubt his choice, but now? Well, at least her voice was soothing. He sat down, back against the tree, and closed his eyes, letting her song wash over him. Today had gone so wrong from beginning to end, but a little bit of happiness before his end would calm his nerves. It helped that her song reminded him of what Mom used to sing to him before bed. Before everything went wrong. It was a reminder of what he could have had, what his brother does have. A reminder of his ambitions, dreams ripped out of reach by an unlucky fate. It was a song of hope, hope to be freed from the chains of fate that brought him here, and bound him to a dim future. In a sense, death really is freedom from fate. But there's nothing to hope for after you're gone. Tears trickled down his cheek, but the bruise didn't sting as much anymore, reduced to a dull throb. But the comfort was hollow. Words alone can't fix the mess that is his life. How is a song supposed to help him achieve what he's always chased? He didn't know how long the woman was going to stay for, but if her voice could have this much of an effect on him, maybe she would have the answer he's been looking for. The answer no one else could give him. He just needed to have hope one more time. So he got up, despite the tears, and the fear that he would have his dream ripped up yet again. Because this is how he always was, and always would be until the end. Forever chasing a fantasy, hoping that just one person would validate him. Of course, that doesn't mean he didn't hesitate. His voice was dry, the hot air stopping the words in his throat. He didn't know where to begin, how to reach out to someone new and ask them something like this. But she turned around anyway. He wasn't particularly subtle when he stepped into the clearing, and he had stepped on a crunchy leaf. Oh, hello there, I didn't realize I had an audience. The woman looked awfully excited for someone who had been interrupted in the middle of her performance. It's been so long since I've had someone come to listen. Yeah. Your voice is beautiful. Oh. Well, thank you very much. Most of my audiences before now have been much quieter, so it's not often I get compliments like these. The woman rushed up to Izuku, and he flinched back instinctively, but when he felt her gloved hands holding his own, he slowly relaxed. It was gentle and soft. Much more comforting than Kaken's explosive grasp or his mother's stinging slaps. He slowly opened his eyes, no longer flinching in fear, and looked into her eyes, which looked so full of excitement. Thank you. It's been a while since I've been complimented too. But that's, ugh. Can I ask you something? Of course you can, as long as I can ask you something in return. Izuku sked in a breath. He wasn't expecting to get this far. Most people turned him down the moment they found out what he was. But she didn't know yet. He'd have to tell her if he wanted a real answer, but he was scared. His hands began to tremble, he could feel beads of sweat run down his neck. But he felt her hands once again, pressing down against his, rubbing his fingers, but carefully avoiding the burn marks, so as to not hurt him. Yeah, maybe this time will be different. Can someone like me? Someone who's quirkless really become a hero? Someone who can shine, who people will look to when they're in need. The woman's gaze faltered. It was just for a moment, but Izuku saw it. The look of pity that he saw in everyone else, or at least the people who didn't hate his guts on principle. But she still responded, instead of holding her tongue like so many others. Of course you can be a hero? Everyone can be a hero in their own way. Even if But you don't really believe in me, do you? And the tears started to flow again. I've heard this one before, but it doesn't make me feel better at all. It's hollow. Izuku pushed her hands away, and started towards the cliff. I should finish what I came here to do. Now that I'm sure of the truth. The woman reached towards him, a look of panic he couldn't see behind his back. Wait, hold on No, I've heard all I need to. There's nothing else you could say to Stop. And Izuku stopped. The words weren't particularly moving, they were just loud. But they burrowed through his ears into his brain, and locked his joints like they had rusted over in a blink. He couldn't even open his mouth to argue back, just stuck staring over the edge, towards the fatal drop. I still need to ask you something. So you can't leave until I have my answer. I don't think I could forgive myself if I let you leave. He still couldn't move, but he could listen. Not that he had a choice, but he was used to that. What is it, then? Why are you up here? If he could stare at her, dumbfounded, he would have been doing it by now. Isn't it obvious? Why are you wasting my time asking this when you know the answer already? She stayed silent, waiting. I'm here to kill myself. There. Is that good enough for you? I don't care if you can't forgive yourself for letting me die, but I have to do this. There's nothing left for me down there. That can't be right. There's always something for everyone, no matter how small. You can't give up, or else you'll never find it. Izuku's fist clenched, despite the tight grasp she had over his movements. And what if there's something? Maybe you're right, but what does it matter what I find for me if it's not what I really want out of life? I want to be a hero everyone looks up to, but clearly that's not in the cards for me. So does it really matter what this thing is, if it's not going to make me happy? The woman's voice was quickly becoming panicked, rushed. Like she was trying to get all her words out at once. Like he could even leave the grasp of her quirk. Izuku, if you just give up on finding that something, then you'll never know if it'll make you happy. You'll never be able to find people who will lift you up, or things that you're just as passionate about as you are about becoming a hero. You can't just lay down and die. You aren't me. You haven't gone through what I have, you don't know how wait. Huh? Did I say something wrong? How do you know my name? Her hold faltered, and Izuku whipped around. I never told you my name. Who are you? Why were you here at all? Why aren't you saying anything? Izuku took a step back, and the woman stepped forwards. Despite the heat, his sweat had gone cold. Was this someone who had been sent to ambush him? Plenty of the local quirk supremacists had done similar things before, but they didn't beat around the bush and just beat him from the jump. Maybe she was a stalker, someone who wanted to keep him from killing himself so she could traffic him, or kill him herself, or keep him in a basement for the rest of. It's because I'm you. What? The woman that had been standing before him was gone. He hadn't even blinked, but it looked like she just blipped out of existence. Something was very wrong. His body felt heavy in all the wrong places, and he felt a sudden wave of nausea overtake him. Even if she was gone, he felt himself lock up again, but he looked down anyway. Not over the cliff, but at his own hands, ones which were flickering. One moment they looked burnt, scarred, and all too familiar, and the next they were concealed within thin black gloves. He could feel the fabric rub against his skin intermittently, before turning back to the rough, worn-out skin that he was so used to. The nausea proved stronger than the force holding him still, and he collapsed to the ground near the edge, losing consciousness on impact. It was bright white when he opened his eyes again. His body felt normal again, the weight was gone, but he still had to squint to adjust to the brightness. He let himself lie there and just breathe for a moment, trying to understand what was going on. The blinding white scenery wasn't actually hard to process for Izuku. Once he sat up, he remembered that he'd seen this many times before. It was a recurring dream, one he remembered from as far back as 5 years old. It was the only dream he could ever remember when waking up. The others would slip away from his memory, but this one remained. A large white void, with figures slowly moving around the space that got more blurry the harder you tried to focus on them. He always assumed that his memory had just been fuzzy, but in the moment he realized it wasn't possible to make out any defining features for any of them. All except for one. There was a pavilion in the middle of the void. Never before had anything been here, but now it was sitting there like it had always existed. It was surrounded by a small ring of grass that faded into white, just enough to lay a blanket across. And standing inside, next to a mic stand, was that same woman. She was laying on the railing, looking out towards the vast expanse of wherever they were. Izuku was still annoyed with her, but more than that he was confused and curious. Today had been pretty standard up until she showed up, so he wanted to clear things up. So he got up and walked over to her yet again, with a bit more drive this time. "Hey!" The woman jolted, before pushing herself up from the railing. She looked back at Izuku, but couldn't quite meet his eyes. The look of guilt and remorse on her face made him falter for a moment, but he knew he had to push her for more info. "Who are you, actually? And, don't give me that, I am you again, that can't be right." "Well, that's half true, but I guess I should introduce myself for real this time." The woman cleared her throat, grabbing the mic stand nearby. Izuku stepped back a bit, to give her some space. He wasn't sure what kind of introduction required a microphone, but, "Hiya darling. This is Hololive English Advent's Devilish Diva, the one and only Nerissa Ravencroft." "Ah. Okay. This day just keeps getting more odd." Izuku had a name for her now, Nerissa, but even more questions. "Hololive English Advent? I don't mean to be rude, but, what are you talking about?" Nerissa looked a bit confused as well, but laughed it off. "I have no idea. It just felt right for me to say it. Like how I was compelled to be out there on the cliff that night." "Right, you were there, but now you're here with me. In my dream." "How?" "I dunno. I was just born 5 minutes ago." Sorry if I sound like a broken record, but what? What are you talking about?" "I just came into being 5 minutes ago. I think. I don't remember anything before. Well actually, hold on, I kinda do remember? But I don't." Nerissa started to pace around the pavilion, and Izuku watched after her, trying to wrap his mind around the whole thing. Okay. Nerissa, why don't we come back to that later? Why were you out there to begin with? You said you were compelled, so there's gotta be a reason." Right, sorry, let's get back on track." Nerissa stopped by the entrance, hand on the railing. "Why don't we sit down on the grass? It's been a while since I felt it beneath my feet." "I thought you were born 5 minutes ago." It's complicated. We've got time. Maybe?" The two of them sat down on the grass, backs leaned against the pavilion walls. Nerissa fiddled with her staff, which somehow Izuku hadn't noticed until now. He probably just glossed over it while he was taking everything in. "You don't mind if I just info-dump a bit to you, Izuku? We're going to be working together from now on, so I'll do my best to not leave out a single detail." "Yeah, do that. It'd be better for both of us if we figured out what's going on." Izuku put his hands onto his face, and groaned. "This is such a mess," he muttered to himself. "You can say that again." Nerissa nodded solemnly, and placed her hand on his shoulder, giving it a light squeeze. "So let me tell you what I've figured out. I was one of those blurry figures out there for the longest time." She points at one of the figures closer to the two of them. Of course, there's no response from it. "I don't remember explicitly being one of them, but I just know that's what I was. And I know that I was called to, and materialized into who I am now, by you." "I called out to you?" "Unconsciously, but yeah. In that moment, you needed someone to save you, and so I was brought out of the, what should I call it, the blurry state." Nerissa looked unsatisfied with that name. "I'm sure I can think of something better." "Hold on for a second. You said, That you came because I needed someone to save me. But, Izuku curled up into himself. He was grateful to have someone there for him, but, hey, are you alright? But why didn't you come earlier? I always needed someone to save me. Why only now, when I was so convinced it was all over? When I was finally ready to go. Oh, Narissa's hand clenched around his shoulder, and she hesitated for a brief moment, unsure of what to do, before holding his face in her hands. Come here. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you sooner. Izuku let himself be brought into a hug, something he didn't realize he was lacking until he had it once again. He needed someone to support him, he realized, and so he let himself lean into the hug, and let Narissa rustle his hair and soothe his heart with her voice. Thank you. Of course. I'm here for you. It's been a while. Since someone said they would support me. They stayed in a comfortable silence for a while. Izuku just needed time to accept the past once again. It isn't going to change, but now he has a chance. Maybe something real can come out of this. Narissa. I'm ready for you to keep going. She smiled down at him, and he felt a little calmer. Sitting back down next to her, he turned to listen carefully. Okay, but let me just say. The first step is always the hardest. It took this long to finally bring me to you, but maybe now that you've done it once, you can do it again. But how would I do that? I dunno. I guess we'll have to figure that out together, then. Since we're stuck together, probably. Considering I'm a part of you, I'd say we're stuck together. Right, you're me. That's so weird to think about. But if you're just a part of me, then how were you on the cliff? What, if this is my quirk, then what could possibly be going on with it? Well, I can answer the first bit just fine. You were hallucinating. Oh, yeah. It was partly me, though. I used my song to speak to you in your mind, and cause you to see me in person. And if you're a part of me, does that mean I can do that too? Izuku squinted, recalling what had happened before he blacked out. My body was flickering, between my own, and yours. So if those are your powers, then you should be able to use them if you use my form. Izuku leaned back and stared up at the white void. Holy shit. I have a quirk. And since there's a ton of other figures here, it's probably super versatile. And it's got a transformation aspect too, so in addition to whatever I get from the other figures, I can disguise as them too. This is incredible. There was a smile plastered on his face now, as he rattled off every possible thing he could think of related to his new quirk. Narissa breathed a sigh of relief, now that he wasn't so down in the dumps. But there was still something she needed to address. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something else I need to mention. Oh, yeah. Tell me. Sorry for going on so long. Don't be, it was cute. But, I don't think this is a quirk. Huh? Yes, it's your power, but I don't see how I could be a part of a quirk. I have memories from before I said I materialized earlier, but I think woke up would be a better way to put it. Izuku watched her as she spoke about her past. I remember my parents, and my siblings, but a lot of my memories are from the cell. And I know I had friends there, people I basically grew up with, who I was the closest to. But I can't remember their names, or their faces, or anything else about them. It's all just a blur. He saw her eyes narrow, trying to recall anything about them, before they shut completely, and she flopped over, laying on the grass. You can remember your family, right? Yeah. No issues there. But if your friends are a blur, then, Izuku looked out at the expanse once again, watching the figures pass. Maybe they're with us? There are plenty of blurry figures out there, so maybe one day you'll get to reconnect. Maybe. And maybe I'll get to meet them too. You can introduce me, and tell me all about the things you did together. We just need to hope they'll show up, I suppose. Narissa flipped over onto her back, and Izuku laid down next to her. I can't wait to remember them. I know we had so much fun together. So don't you go dying on me before I get to that, okay? Okay. I can do that. Then, I guess I should see you off now. Izuku sat up, and turned to look at her. Really? I just got here. I feel like we have so much more to talk about. Well, we could talk forever about all sorts of things. But we're still laying at the top of a cliff, and it's a long walk back down the path. We need to get back home. Oh, right. Their body was still in the real world, not this dreamscape, and they don't want to be late. If Mom finds out he was up doing this, it's gonna be so weird knowing that we're the same person, technically. But yeah, I should get going. How do I leave again? Through the door. The what? Izuku looked over to where Narissa was pointing, and there was a door. Just sitting there. Ah, right, the door. Of course. Izuku shook his head and stood up, with Narissa following suit. I guess I'll talk to you again, Well, I'm in your head, so we can talk whenever. Huh? That's nice. Then I'll see you when I wake up. Bye, darling. Izuku blushed a bit at that. Of course he would, the only woman in his life before now was his mom, and she, well, you know. Bye. Once he grabbed the door handle, he felt his weight shift, and suddenly he was back on the overlook, laying on the ground. In Narissa's body. So how does he turn back, again? Oh, make one, the long walk home? Turns out turning back was as simple as imagining doing so. What wasn't simple was tuning out the new voice in his head. Narissa really took talk whenever to heart, and she was currently complaining about the heat. You know, you don't have to be here right now. You can relax in my head instead of dealing with the heat. But I want to talk to you. You're the only person I have right now. On second thought, maybe having a friend on demand wasn't the worst. Izuku just hopes this doesn't become a trend. He considers himself lucky that Narissa can't hear all his thoughts, just the ones he transmits to her. Izuku is currently lying on the ground, in an alleyway not far from home, bleeding out from a stab wound to the chest. Two men stand over him, one whose eyes are darting to and from the alley's exit while the other's fingers fly across his phone's keyboard, contacting someone unknown. Of course, neither of the two were actually worried about Izuku's well-being. After all, they were the ones who stabbed him. They were more concerned about not getting caught. Dude, we have to get out of here. I didn't think the kid was just gonna stand there frozen. The man stopped mid-text, head turning to face the more panicked one. Well, we're in this situation now, we need to clean this mess up before we end up in jail. How? Start by grabbing the knife, it's got your fingerprints on it. And stop screaming. Someone might hear. Gee, got it. The man leaned down towards Izuku's writhing body and gripped the handle, before yanking the blade out of his chest. He gasped in pain as the blade came loose, blood dripping down his uniform. And break the camera up there. The man with the phone points to a camera sitting high up on the wall. I can't get up there, but you can. The man with the knife crouched down, before leaping 10 feet into the air, onto the fire escape, and started climbing, while the other went back to furiously texting. Izuku turned away from them, clutching the wound, and transmitted his thoughts to Narissa. Do you have any way I could get out of this? I could really use some self-healing or a power boost right about now. Narissa was equally panicked. I wish I had something for you, but I don't. Transforming won't help either, we're only as strong as you are. All I have for you is my voice? Maybe that can help, but I don't see us getting to a hospital in time. There's no way this is where it ends. It can't be, I just got a second chance. I shouldn't have been in this situation to begin with, if it wasn't for Kaken. 5 hours earlier. Don't you dare show your face in class today, Deku. You've been smiling too much lately, it's pissing me off. Bakugo and his lackeys stared down at Izuku from the doorway of the broom closet. He was backlit by the harsh LEDs from the hallway, so his face was barely visible, but Izuku knew he was sneering at him. He slowly got to his feet, but Bakugo was faster, stepping back and slamming the door in his face. Kaken wait dash. But with a soft click, the lock on the door engaged, and Bakugo walked off, ignoring his pleas. No matter how hard he banged on the door, or how loud he screamed, none of the students passing by would spare him a glance. Not that they could do anything, they didn't have a key. And so there he sat, watching the hours pass by, and the school slowly moved along without him. At least Narissa was there to keep him company this time. He knew that the janitor would let him out when they came to clean, as this wasn't the first time he'd been locked up, but it still stung. He'd get zeros on whatever the rest of the classes had for the day, and there would be no late SBMSN. There never was. He was let out eventually, like predicted, but not without a talking to from the janitor. But he just ignored them, and hurried out. It was already dark out, and he needed to get home. Mom was gonna be furious, but he didn't have any other options. It wasn't too dark out yet, but it was going to get darker fast. The sun was already under the horizon, and as a quirkless person, Izuku never wanted to get caught outside when the light was low. People got too comfortable getting violent, doing things they would dare in the light. Which is why Izuku should have been caught less off guard when his neck was grabbed from the shadows of an alley, and he was thrown in, back impacting against a dumpster. He choked on his own spit, scrambling to his feet as his attackers made themselves known. S-sheet. Who the hell dash? Who said you could talk, filthy quirkless? The taller one shouted, holding a sheet. He had a knife. Must have been the one who threw Izuku, too, since the other guy was preoccupied with his phone. Rough him up a bit for me, okay dude? I've gotta make sure this deal doesn't go bad. Already planning on it. The man cracked his knuckles, and Izuku tried to get into a defensive position, before getting gut-checked and crumpling yet again. But, he had to get back up. He just got another chance, he had to at least try to defend himself. So he stood, and tried to swing at him, stepping forwards in the process. Right into the man's knife swing. The blade, which was originally just going to scratch, instead entered his chest, lodging itself at an odd angle. Izuku went down, of course, and the man stepped back in panic. The other guy looked up, and his eyes went wide. You idiot dash. It was no time to reminisce on his mistakes. He couldn't do anything to fix them, but right now, he needed help, and he only had one option at this point. He had to call for help. But there was no one willing to help him in the real world. No one who was close enough, that is, so instead, please, if any of you can hear me? I know all I need to do is call for you, and the right person will come, if there even is a right person. So please, I need your help. At first, he felt nothing. But he kept believing anyway. After all, he didn't feel anything up on that cliff until Nerissa was already there. He just needed to give them time, but he didn't have much time left. The blood loss was getting to his head, he was beginning to grow tired. But some people don't care too much about blood loss. Nerissa. I come to you in your time of need. Oh, and Izuku too, of course. Now quickly, use my body. Okay, we could have worded that way better, but whatever, we've got more pressing issues anyways. I should introduce myself, shouldn't I? Izuku felt his body start to change. Not as much as when he morphed into Nerissa, but the more major changes were in the skin itself. It became rougher, held together by stitches, and gray. Bandages covered his arms and legs, and his clothes became ripped, barely holding together. Most pressingly, there was a new object stabbed through his body, a large weight dragging his head to one side. Zambanwa. Super kawaii zombie idol, kuku kureji ali disu. He yanked the sword out of his head, and felt no pain at all. The pain in his chest faded to a dull throb, and then into nothing as he stood, the men's backs still turned away from him. Nice to meet you, Ali. Now, let's get to work. Izuku could feel the wound in his chest begin to close on its own, albeit with stitches. No time to contemplate that, though, as he raised the sword above his head. The man on his phone, feeling a disturbance, lifted his head, but it was too late. Izuku swung down, careful to use the flat side, and smashed the sword into his skull. The guy was barely skin and bones, so one blow was enough to put him down for the count, but the other guy would be tougher. He had just smashed the camera, and turned around to witness the blow. Who the F are you? And where'd the kid go? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Izuku still wasn't physically strong, but he had a weapon now, and a body that wouldn't falter to just a knife. So as the man dropped back down, he charged, point of the blade towards the enemy. His eyes widened as he saw Izuku's blade coming near, and he crouched, charging his jump quirk to try and escape, but it didn't finish fast enough. The charm attached to the grip jingled as Izuku struck true, and he swung left, cutting a gash into the man's leg. The big guy fell onto his back, crying out in pain and gripping the wound. He screamed louder than Izuku did, and it was just a leg injury. Wow, you can deal it out but you can't take it back, huh? Izuku didn't give him time to shoot back, jumping onto his chest and knocking the wind out of him. Then, he started stomping. Wham, 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 straight into his face. The man desperately slashed at his legs, only landing a single hit, but he didn't let up until the arms stopped moving. That worked out. You had the element of surprise. Nerissa chimed in. We've got no clue what the phone guy's quirk was, and it's better we didn't find out. More importantly, you were so cool. Ali exclaimed, and Izuku could practically see her bouncing around in his head. It's a shame they went down so quickly, I wanted to see what you can do. That's about the extent of my abilities. I don't have any formal training. Well, then we gotta get you some, duh. If you're moving like this now, imagine how cool you'll be then. On another note, the big guy destroyed the camera, so I don't think your transformation got caught on video. Nerissa noted. Izuku looked up at the camera, hanging by wires from the wall. You might want to rip it down anyways, and crush it fully, just to be safe. Yeah, let's do that. Izuku changed into Nerissa's form, since she was quite a bit taller, and grabbed the fire escape. Trying to make as little noise as possible, he clambered up the metal grates and grabbed the camera, using Nerissa's staff to cut it loose from the cables. Then, he dropped down to the alley floor and slammed it to the ground, using her heels to really mash it into mechanical bits. Let's head home. Izuku was dreading this. Mom was not going to be happy at the state of his uniform. It still had a rip from the knife, even if the wound was gone. He'd have to clean the blood off too before he got back. He needed a good excuse. Young man, where have you been? And you even got your uniform soaked, is that a tear in it as well? Why yeah, sorry, Mom. You'd better be sorry, I'll have to pay for a new one of those. At least the burnt ones stay usable, but if it's cut, then it has to be replaced. I know. I got attacked on the way home by some supremacists, and they cut my uniform. And why were you out so late? You missed dinner, and there's no way I'm giving you the leftovers now. Kaken locked me in the broom closet again. Inko looked away and clicked her tongue. She knew how Bakugo acted by this point. There was no getting around the burn scars and frequent reports. She just chose not to care, but that meant she couldn't refute Izuku's excuse. The best defense, sometimes, is to tell the truth. Well, half of it. So what did you do to provoke him anyways? Itsuki commented from the dinner table. That was Izuku's twin. The better one, in Mom's eyes, since he got the quirk. It was just telekinesis, a logical mutation of Inko's attraction of small objects, but it was enough for him to get all the love and care. Izuku sat down at the dinner table, head low. I was smiling too much. Aren't you always smiling? Not anymore. Right? The two of them lapsed into silence. Inko was on the phone with the school, to see how much the new uniform would cost. Itsuki sipped his water. Izuku contemplated his life. He glanced around the table, noticing a used bowl at a spot no one sits at. Itsuki. Yeah? Was Dad over? Yeah. Izuku sighed into his hands. Of course it was while I was gone. He always shows when you aren't home, doesn't he? And his portion was probably mine, wasn't it? Itsuki just looked away. He knew then that it was true. Mom didn't save any leftovers for him from the beginning. He'd have to try and sneak a snack or two after they went to sleep, and hope that would be enough to last until tomorrow. How much do you think Inko will have to pay for the new uniform? Nerissa wondered. Enough for her to take it out on me, I presume. 60,000 yen? Inko exclaimed into the phone speaker. Izuku could hear the call hang up shortly after. Yikes. Yikes, said Nerissa and Ollie, in harmony with Izuku. Inko whipped around, storming towards him. He just braced for impact. At least when he knew it was coming, the slaps hurt less. Whap. He gripped the table to keep from falling, eyes cast down at the hardwood floor. Itsuki looked away. Go to your room. I don't want to see your face tonight. Yes, mother. Izuku stood up, and didn't dare look back. Itsuki took another sip of his water. There was some soothing cream he had stored in his desk for times like these when he couldn't use the bathroom, since it wasn't connected to his room. He sat down at his desk and slowly applied it to the red mark on his cheek, feeling the pain slowly float away. Izuku, why don't you just use my body to heal up? Ollie inquired, and she had a good point. Right, yeah. This is just my usual routine, but I've got more options now. Briefly swapping into Ollie's body, he felt the pain fade entirely in just a few seconds, and he was able to turn back in no time. It was times like these where he was glad that Mom never cared enough about his safety to install cameras in his room. The clock above his desk ticked in rhythm as he stared at his laptop, an empty tab staring back. He didn't really know what to type, but he knew he had to get stronger if he wanted to be a hero with this power. He couldn't rely on each body's individual abilities like a crutch. That would only get him so far. Nerissa broke the silence with a question that had been bothering her since earlier. Hey, you mentioned your father earlier. You never told me about him before. What's he like? Ugh. Him. I barely know anything about the guy. Well, tell us what you do know, then. Right. Let me rack my brain. I haven't seen him since the diagnosis, so I don't remember what he looked like, but? Mom told me he's just like me. Nerissa raised an eyebrow. At least, Izuku imagined she did. He's quirkless. No. He's super passionate about quirks, like I am. But, I don't think he likes them in the same way. Mom and Itsuki never talked to me about him, but from what I've heard, he's a collector. That got the two of them to pause. Ollie was the first to inquire. A quirk collector? How? Aren't they tied to the person who owns them? Yeah, they are, which is why that scares me. Apparently the people he's interested in just disappear. And if they show up again, they're totally different. A lot more hollow, I guess would be how to describe it. I've only seen it once, but the guy was like a ghost. Ugh, scary. Suddenly I don't want to meet him anymore. Izuku leaned back in his chair, staring up at the clock. I don't think he wants to meet me, well, us, at all. He still regularly talks to Mom and Itsuki, but, according to them, I'm unworthy of being in contact at all. You can guess why. Nerissa came back to the conversation with her own thoughts. So you should keep us a secret from him, then. On the off chance we are a quirk, he could disappear us too. I don't know, would he really do that to his child? Can we risk that? Izuku shook his head. No. If we want to become a hero, then I need to get stronger, bring to life more of you guys, and get away from this house. Right now, only the first is something I can do consistently. There was no way for Izuku to know what the unlock conditions were like for the others trapped inside his head, if there were even conditions at all. Both Narissa and Ollie came during near-death experiences, kind of, but he couldn't just throw himself at similar situations and expect a savior. He had to play it safe and focus on training himself before all else. As for getting away from the house? He was broke without Mom. She wouldn't kick him out, but he knew if he left he was gonna starve or get attacked again. It was a death wish, really, so leaving was a worst-case scenario. That left training. Mom wouldn't care where he went over the weekend, as long as he was back for dinner, so he could spend the days training outside, and the nights training in his room, as long as he wasn't too loud at home. That was doable, though. And you should probably learn how to use our powers too. Good point, Hey, how long have you been listening in? Narissa scoffed. Don't accuse me, you were the one projecting your thoughts. Izuku blushed, and hid his face in shame. Not that it did anything. So I ramble even in my head. I thought it was cute. Thanks, Ollie. But we're getting off topic. The two of them went quiet as Izuku leaned forwards, back at the empty tab. We need to make a real plan. The two things I need to do first are learn self-defense and strength training. Which one do we want to figure out first? Self-defense. Strength training. The two of them shouted simultaneously. Okay, so we're flipping a coin. Heads is self-defense, tails is strength training. Izuku peered around in his desk for a while, looking to see if he had a coin. This proved fruitless, and so he just put "flip a coin" into the search bar. The web browser played a fun little animation before the word "tails" appeared on screen. Ollie cheered in his head. Alright, this is the one we'll need to get out of the house for, but there's a problem. I don't have a gym membership. So, buy one. Narissa, we're broke. Mom isn't gonna pay for anything for me, not after today. I should have guessed. No worries, just means we need to find a place that has heavy things. Any ideas? Ollie seemed to already have a place in mind. The graveyard, of course. It was really hard to claw out of my grave, so there's probably heavy things there. You want me to bench press a tombstone? Yeah. I think I'd get arrested for grave robbing, but big slabs of stone are a step in the right direction. We probably aren't going to find normal weights lying around, so the next best thing is just bricks of material, I guess. Like Dagoba Beach? I remember that place had piles of trash. That's not a bad idea. The day before, Izuku and Narissa had passed by the beach in question, and Narissa was distraught at the state of it, lamenting that it had such great potential as a performance venue. And hauling trash off the beach would be killing two birds with one stone. The only reason Izuku wasn't built like a twig is because Inko forced him to take the trash out himself every week, so he understood its potential. Yeah. The beach is perfect, actually. We can make it into a place people would actually want to go, and maybe one day you can perform there. Well, me in your body, but still. You'll be fine, I'm sure. You were better at singing when you were in my body, so maybe you pick up more than just our powers when you transform. I was hitting some pretty high notes, that's for sure. Ollie perked up at that. Wait, I want to hear. Hearing two Narissas at once? I would be in heaven. And not right now. I don't want to get heard by anyone. Okay. I guess I can wait. In the meantime, Narissa, can you please sing to me? Izuku buried his face in his hands for what felt like the millionth time today as Narissa happily obliged. Can we please get back on topic? We still need to look into self-defense. The two of them exchanged a glance, or at least Izuku imagined they did. I don't know how much we can help you in that, Narissa lamented. If you don't have a baseline for us to build off, teaching you how we fight isn't going to go well. You'll need to find some sort of self-defense course to learn the basics first. Luckily, they're the basics. Shouldn't take you that long to get down. Hopefully. Thanks for the vote of confidence, but what self-defense course would be willing to take in a quirkless kid? Izuku pivoted his focus back to his computer, the coin still sitting on screen. Showing up to a class in person wouldn't work, too many people around Muzutafo knew him and his quirkless status, but he didn't need an in-person course. All he needed was the basics, and from there he could learn during his sleep, in the dreamscape. He pulled up an incognito tab. Don't want Mom seeing what I'm looking at. She can check my searches when I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. Izuku clarified. He wasn't sure how much the others knew about modern tech, but it couldn't hurt. I think HeroTube should have some crash courses on self-defense. You're just gonna watch videos? It should be enough. If it's not, I'll look for more. Fair enough. Narissa seemed satisfied with his plan. And during your sleep, we can teach you our techniques. Well, you can't transform while in the dreamscape, but we can give you a demonstration at least. I don't think he needs a demonstration to learn how to be a zombie, Narissa. Well, I'd be happy if you taught me how to wield a sword. Okay. Yay. Then, I think we're done for today. Izuku stood up from his desk, closing the laptop. He was still hungry, but he was smiling as he collapsed onto his bed. I think that everything's gonna work out. We've got a real plan now, so it's possible. I can really be a hero. He couldn't stop smiling as he turned, gripping his pillow tightly to his chest. He was crying again, but he wasn't sad. Quite the opposite, actually. He had a habit of crying whenever his emotions were strong, whether he was sad, angry, scared, or anything else. But he hadn't felt strong enough joy to get to this state in far too long. It felt good. Omake 2, reassurance. Izuku and Narissa were in the dreamscape, sitting at Ollie's ramen stall. It had appeared when he went to bed for the night. The food wasn't actually edible, but Ollie wanted to practice her cooking anyway. You're very skilled with the blade, aren't you? Narissa leaned forward to get a closer look at how she was cutting the vegetables. I can barely follow her hands. Izuku noted. Yeah, her blade work has always been impressive. You can say that Izuku and Narissa looked up in sync. Ollie continued chopping. Sitting next to the two, on the last stool, was a man with the fanciest coat Izuku had ever seen, with a black crown sitting on top of dark red hair. Jurard T. Rexford, bounty hunter and the leader of the Armis unit. Izuku's eyes are suddenly drawn to the two pistols sitting on his waist. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I'm a bit shocked that you just showed up? Heh, my presence tends to do that to people. Jurard goes to comb his fingers through his hair, trying to look cool, and knocks his crown off. Gah. Ignore that. He hops off the stool and goes to get his crown from under the stall. Well, good to know that not every unlock has to be a life or death situation. I'll be in your care, Jurard. Me too, Jurard says, arm almost fully under the stall and still grasping at air. The sand at Dagoba Beach wasn't very smooth, and as you got further from the water, the individual grains got larger and more misshapen. The water didn't reach where the trash was piled up, so the only way the sand would shrink in size was foot traffic, and no one actually wanted to be by the trash for obvious reasons. All of this is to say, a lot of the larger pieces of trash were getting scratched up by the large grains, and overall the friction made things harder to push around. For Izuku, though, this wasn't half bad. He needed the exercise anyways, seeing as about a week ago he looked like a twig, and would snap like one too. He hadn't made too much progress since then, but the soreness told him he was doing something right. It helped to have friends to talk to, though, to abate the loneliness. Some of the passers-by thought he was schizophrenic. He ignored the looks of confusion. Sometimes they stuck around a bit to watch, but they were always gone before he left for dinner. Currently, he was dragging a washing machine. He'd found a winch from a beat-up car in the pile a few days ago, and he was putting it to good use. Anything remotely rectangular was now pulled with a rope, instead of his old strategy of rolling it, if you can even call that rolling. I have to ask, but why are there so many washing machines here? This is the 5th one I've dragged to the curb so far. Maybe because they break so much more frequently? Jurard supplied. The one back at my place never broke, but the ones here look super cheap. Narissa chimed in with her own question. Why would people bother dragging them to the beach instead of calling someone to pick it up? It's such a hassle just to ruin a nice venue. Calling for a pickup costs a lot. Dumping is free. Rude. Ollie shouted, quite a bit louder than he would have liked. Being a respectful neighbor is also free. Well, that's why we're here, I suppose. He pictured them in his head while he continued to drag, talking away in, wherever they were. He'd been learning a lot about the dreamscape these past weeks, including the fact that they watched him through a window, and there was even a couch in the room they watched from. He couldn't go in it, though, since he couldn't watch himself pilot his body. That would be impossible. He'd been practicing what he was learning from the self-defense courses inside the dreamscape, after he had gotten a feel for them in real life. Having people to spar against was convenient, and his injuries didn't last, since, despite it feeling real, it was all technically in his head. The upside of this was he could wear himself out much more before having to stop. The downside was he was learning a lot about pain. He even learned how it feels to get shot. Not fun. Izuku stopped pulling the machine, moving behind it and pushing it just a bit further to the curb. He wasn't able to fully remove some of the larger pieces of trash, so he had been sorting it into piles. The smaller stuff he could bag and carry over to some of the dumpsters across the street, so they weren't an issue. For the larger stuff, he'd made 2 piles, one he called functional and the other scrap. The scrap pile had remained largely untouched, although he had seen a girl digging through it after it got large enough. The functional pile, on the other hand, was gone. It had been building up for a few days, but he returned to the beach one day to see it had disappeared, and from then on the pile had never lasted more than a day. You guys think we'll find out who's taking it today? No. The 3 said in harmony. Understood. It's probably just someone from the prefecture's waste management who's happy to not sift through the trash piles. Izuku shrugged and started pushing the washing machine upright for easier collection. As he did, its door popped open, and something fell out onto the sand. It was a doll, in surprisingly good shape for being in the dump. Izuku finished standing up the machine, and grabbed it. Narissa was immediately taken by it. Ah, it's so cute. Why was that in a washing machine? I would say to wash it, but it's not made of fabric. At least, not entirely. Izuku ran his hand along the doll. It seemed like something made by a craftsman, with intricate patterns woven into its clothes, and carefully crafted joints that still moved cleanly even after being abandoned. It's high quality, so I don't think it was abandoned on purpose. Maybe it was left inside and forgotten. That's a sad way to go. I don't think anything deserves to be left behind. Izuku stayed quiet for a moment, turning it around in his hands. Let's keep it. Whoever made this put a lot of work into it, and I haven't gotten anything for myself in a long while. You seem to like it, so there's no reason to toss it in the dumpster. It was getting late, and Izuku wanted to head home soon, but there was one problem. There was a man watching him, and he was directly in the way of his normal route. He looked over at him, and they locked eyes. Izuku quickly looked away. He really didn't like the attention. Maybe it was just the nerves getting to him, but now that he had powers, he was really noticing all the stares. He hadn't transformed in public yet, though, so he was probably just being paranoid. I see that guy around a lot. Do you think he knows? Izuku swapped to mental projection. Talking to yourself is weird, you know. You worry too much. Why would some random guy possibly know about us? Ali reassured him. Sorry. I'm just worried. For all the times Izuku was bullied for being quirkless, he would have never considered hiding one, if he had one, but here he was. He had been powerless for too long, that's what everyone thought of him as. And for him to suddenly show up with a quirk one day? Not to mention one where he could turn into a grown woman, a zombie, and a guy with 2 pistols? He couldn't imagine anyone, especially Kaken, not giving him weird looks. Nothing would change, really. He'd still be a freak, just in a different way. Narissa's voice snapped him from his thoughts. We need to get by him either way. It's about time to get back for dinner. And if you ask me, I'd rather you eat than starve. I appreciate the concern. Let's just try and walk past without interacting. He turned from the pile and started heading home, careful to avoid making eye contact with the man. Hey, kid. Can I talk to you for a moment? This plan immediately failed. Sure, I guess. What do you need? Izuku didn't even try to fight back. He wasn't good enough at talking to people just yet. Well, I wanted to thank you for what you've been doing. No one's really tried to clean this beach until you came along. To be honest, it was a little sad to watch it degrade over the years. By the way, my name's Toshinori Yagi. What's yours? Right. I'm Izuku Midoriya. The man smiled fondly at him, almost like he was proud of him. Young Midoriya, you're doing a very good thing here. I hope you'll stick around to finish, but I can't help but wonder something. What's your quirk? Izuku's hand stopped fidgeting. He had almost let his guard down, but now it was back up in full. Does he know? Jurud was the first person to respond. Izuku, there's no way he dash. He's been watching me for days now, of course he knows. He's gonna tell people, and they're gonna find out about you guys, and then maybe Dad will find out, and maybe he'll take me away. Oh Kami, what about Kaken? He'll be so mad, he probably would think I've been hiding this from him. Izuku's hands began to tremble. His grip on the doll tightened, sweat started to drip down his neck. But before he could get two in his own head. Hey, kid? You alright? Sorry if I pressed a nerve, that was a pretty personal question. You don't need to answer me. Sorry, I need to go. Izuku grabbed the doll tight to his chest and sped away from Yagi. The man watched him as he left, with a guilty look on his face, but he didn't chase after. Now wasn't the time for that, he could apologize another day. Izuku, come back to me. You need to calm down. Sorry Narissa? Let me just catch my breath. She was worried about him. They all were. But he needed some time to relax. He wants so badly to be able to just talk about them to others, but his head is only filled with what could go wrong. There are just so many ways that revealing what he can do can blow up in his face. Which is why you need to focus on the positives of having us. You can't clam up like this just off a question. Yeah man, we're here for you, so keep your head up. I was projecting again, huh? Ali and Jurud were, a lot, when they were together, but they still talked to him calmly when he needed it. He was just so thankful to have all of them. Eventually I'll be able to be proud of who I am, who we are, but I need to build my own confidence first. I'm never going to be the hero I want to be if I can't handle a simple question. We can work on that eventually. Let's focus on your physical body first, you're already multitasking on that as is. Izuku had found out that Jurod's idea of working on his body was avoiding getting shot at. Yeah, he was more flexible now, but ouch. He took what he could get, though. I'm feeling calmer now. Let's get home before sundown. Standing up from his spot on the ground, he set off towards home once again, and turned the corner. Only to run immediately into someone. Someone he really didn't want to see right now. Who the he, Deku? Jurod sked in a breath. You're joking, Keikaken? What? Don't you look where you're going, you quirkless freak? Izuku backed up, wanting to curl up into a ball and block out the world. And what the hell is that shitty piece of trash? Oh. The doll. I found it on the dash. I don't care where you found it, Deku. I didn't think you were into girly things like that. But maybe I should have expected it. His lackeys laughed at that one. It wasn't even funny, really, but when Izuku was the punchline, they just couldn't help themselves. What the? Bakugo stepped forwards, covering the distance, and yanked it out of his grasp. Trash like this should be thrown in the garbage. I need to stand up for myself. I can't just let things happen to me. Kaken. It was already in the trash when I found it at Dagoba. It would be pointless to just throw it away again. Oh. I totally screwed that up, didn't I? I stuttered way too. At Dagoba? The landfill? Bakugo suddenly looked at the doll with disgust. I don't want to touch anything from that trash heap. He chucked the doll back at Izuku, and it hit him in the face with a loud clack. You got lucky this time, freak. I need to wash my hands. Let's go. As Bakugo walked away, Izuku fell to the ground once again, clutching the doll. Jurod broke the silence first. That worked surprisingly well. It needs work, but you did get what you wanted. Yeah. I did, didn't I? I stood up to him, and won, kinda. Izuku rubbed his face, which stung from the blow. This was becoming a trend, but the fuzzy feeling in his chest made it hurt less. Thankfully, the rest of the way home was uneventful, and he was able to safely store the doll in his room without getting seen. Like every other day, dinner was tense. He wasn't ever able to meet his mother's gaze, and Itsuki didn't like to talk while he ate, so Izuku usually just left as soon as he could. No one ever objected to his early departure. They were happier without him around. Sometimes Mom even smiled. Today had drained his social battery, and with that came his energy. He wasn't able to watch many more of the tutorials before he decided to sleep, but that was okay. He could just train more of what he already knew. These things take time, and with the nights available for use, he had that in spades. When he awoke in the dream, however, he was joined by something else. He hadn't even processed that he'd grabbed the doll when he was awake, but it was here with him now, and that struck him as odd. When he had other plushies or even his pillow in his grasp, they didn't follow him in. So clearly, there was something up, and looking back it was odd how he came to have it in his possession to begin with. Oh wow! You even managed to bring it with you. I knew I could count on you. Narissa came up and took the doll, hugging it tightly. You really seem to like it, It's cute. And it reminds me of something, although I can't place what. Ollie walked up to the two of them, but she was looking at something in the distance. Maybe it has something to do with whoever that is? Did someone new show up again? No, look over there. Ollie pointed towards one of the blurry figures off in the distance. Every figure was constantly moving around the white space, so they could never get a clear count of how many there were, but the one the four of them were seeing was different. It was standing completely still, and despite the blur, Izuku knew it was staring right at him. He could feel its gaze boring through him. So he went to investigate. As the group got closer, Narissa suddenly let out a loud noise. Hey! Stop pulling. You can't have it, it's mine. Huh? Narissa, is something pulling on the doll? Izuku stopped to look, and he could see the doll being slightly pulled away from her grasp, but she still held it tightly. Yeah, I can feel it being pulled towards the figure. But I want Dash. It was at this moment that Izuku noticed Ollie was no longer standing beside him. But it was already too late. She was already behind Narissa, and was going in for the grab. Arms around the waist and everything. Narissa squealed as Ollie hugged her tightly, and lost grip on the doll. Which only fell for a second, before the four of them watched as it accelerated towards the blurry figure. On impact, it seemed to be absorbed into its body. What was that, some sort of fetch quest? Ollie, I can't believe you. Narissa whipped around, grabbing Ollie by the sword handle and shaking her head around. Why would you go and do that? Ollie, despite being flung around, seemed to be having the time of her life. Izuku figured that sword was giving her brain damage. While Izuku watched the spectacle, Jurud was the only one who was actually paying attention to the figure, whose blur was starting to fade. Hey, you guys. I think we've got another one. Nerissa finally stopped shaking Ollie around, still holding the sword handle as her arms fell to her sides, squinting to see who it was. Ollie seemed content to hang there and rub her face against Nerissa's legs. Ugh, why do I feel like I know? Oh. Her face went pale. Oh no. The blur was fully gone now, to reveal a woman in a green dress lined with cogs and musical notes. Her skin was perfectly smooth and, well, when Izuku looked closer, it wasn't skin at all. She had doll joints on her shoulders and knees, so whatever she was made of wasn't that. Most notably to him was the large key on her head, and the lance she had in her hands. Behind her, Izuku watched a building construct itself, the first time he'd been there to see it in person. It was a lounge, complete with plush chairs, bookshelves, and an ornate gramophone. It was too bad there wasn't much scenery to look out the large window at. Hopefully as more people joined them, the dreamscape would fill out nicely. She slowly opened her eyes, wincing at the bright white scenery. Izuku took the time to approach her. Sorry if this is a shock. My name is Izuku Midoriya, can I get yours? HM? Oh. Of course, my name is Cecilia Immergreen, I'm an ancient automaton. It's very nice to meet. Cecilia glanced behind Izuku, and locked eyes with Nerissa. You. She picked Izuku up gently, and set him to the side, before pointing her lance towards the demon. I don't know why you're out of your cell, but as a member of justice, I will capture you. Wait, hold on, I need to explain some. Izuku tried to defuse the situation, but his words fell on deaf ears as Cecilia charged at Nerissa, who yelped and started running for her life. Ollie and Jurud were no help either, as the former started cheering fight. Fight, with the latter following suit soon after, not before getting some snacks from Ollie's cart. Their battle was legendary. It lasted for 30 days and 30 nights, with neither side willing to give in to their opponent. The deadlock was brutal, and, I'm joking, of course. They got bored after 30 minutes of chasing each other around nothing, and sat down in the lounge for tea time. The fight itself was pretty entertaining, he had to admit. Watching them poke each other with their weapons, maybe have a few real clashes, and then go back to chasing each other around was fun. They even had a moment where they were on opposite sides of the pavilion, slowly circling it like they were playing tag around a table. Izuku had given up trying to calm the two down, so he was glad it ended so quickly. He took the time to fill Cecilia in on the situation, and a truce was called between Advent and Justice, even if none of the other members were there to witness it. I, Cecilia Immergreen, hereby swear on behalf of all members of Justice to not pursue after and attempt to imprison any members of Advent. And I, Nerissa Ravencroft, hereby swear on behalf of all members of Advent to not cause any unnecessary trouble for any members of Justice. That, unnecessary, was doing a lot of heavy lifting, Izuku thought. But he believed the both of them were mature enough to not try exploiting loopholes. The two of them shook hands, and the deal was sealed. Izuku had one last thing to do, though. I need to let you know something, Cecilia, before I leave you too. Oh? Go on, then. He shot a mischievous look at Nerissa, before sitting back in the chair. Did you know, to bring you here, we had to bring a doll, Anne. Hey, hold on a sec. Nerissa was quite attached to it. She was positively gushing about how cute it was, and it looked just like you. Nerissa was turning quite red very quickly. Cecilia was about to as well, but quickly composed herself with a similarly smug grin. Oh? Does that mean you think I'm cute? Looks like their rivalry wasn't completely gone, but as he watched Nerissa try to stutter out a response, Izuku felt glad that there wasn't any more tension between the two. He had to leave them to it, though, since he had training to get to. Alright, today is gonna be a little different. I've shot at you plenty, but now it's your turn to learn to shoot. Jurud handed him one of his two pistols. It was heavy in his hands, and he promptly pointed it straight down, away from anyone. Is there anything I need to know before we start shooting? Jurud nodded, and pointed at something on the side of the gun. That's the safety, if it's on the gun won't fire. No matter what, never have that off unless you plan to shoot, and never point the gun at anyone you aren't planning to shoot, safety on or not. At anyone I'm planning to shoot. Izuku was a bit hesitant to shoot anyone, but he knew that was something he had to get over if he wanted to be effective. Yeah. Also, don't touch the trigger unless you're about to fire. Just in case. That should be everything you need to know to be safe. Got it. So, what am I shooting at? Izuku looked around to see if he could spot a target, but the dreamscape was still pretty empty. Ollie. Huh? Ollie waved at the two from afar, and raised her voice to speak. What are you guys talking about? Jurud shouted back, nothing, don't worry about it. Okay. Yay. He turned back to Izuku, leaned in, and whispered in his ear. Okay, now shoot before she finds out. Izuku hissed back. I'm not doing that. She'll dodge. Probably. Plus, she's a zombie, she won't feel it if you do hit. He paused for a moment. They were in the dreamscape, so no consequences, and from what he knew about Ollie, she'd probably have fun running around being a target. Can you not just ask her to do this? She probably would say yes, and then I wouldn't feel as bad about shooting at her. Jurard sighed, and turned back to shout at Ollie. You better start running, Ollie. Izuku's gonna start firing now. Okay. Yay. Ollie shouted back, and promptly started running around the void. Izuku raised the pistol, aiming carefully, and fired. He missed, of course, but that was okay. Why am I starting with moving targets anyways? Couldn't find any paper targets in my office. I would have had you firing at those if I had any. This is also more entertaining. Well, I'm missing every shot. At least you're getting close to hitting her. Izuku's shots were landing closer to Ollie, but she was still quite evasive. He was secretly glad he hadn't landed a shot yet, but he still wanted to improve. Maybe it was because he had something else on his mind, though. Jurard? I think I've had an epiphany. Oh really? About what? He set down the gun, clicking the safety on. I think I finally understand how unlocks work. And with that, he had Jurard's attention. Ollie's too, as she ran up next to them. Think about it. Nerissa came because I was having suicidal thoughts, Ollie came because I was in mortal danger, Jurard came out of nowhere, and Cecilia came from what I can only describe as a fetch quest. Can you see what those things have in common? Jurard and Ollie both looked at him confused. Ah, that's right. There's no correlation, it's completely random. Izuku smiled at their exasperated looks. But being serious, I don't think there's any way we can predict arrivals. I can't just hope for someone to save me during my times of need, so I have to operate under the assumption that you all are all I can work with. The two stayed silent, so he continued. I got lucky with Nerissa and Ollie coming to me when I needed them, but my luck always runs out. I can't just go running into fights unless I'm confident I can win. I don't want to lose you all so soon. Suddenly, he felt arms wrap around his waist. It was Ollie again, but she was a lot gentler compared to when she grabbed Nerissa. I don't want to lose you either. So you better work hard and get strong, okay? Yeah. I promise. But? Izuku held up the pistol. Practice isn't over yet. You were foolish to get this close to me. Eek. Ollie squealed, letting go and running away, but not before he landed a few shots. Despite the chaos, this was the happiest he had been in ages. Omega-3, tea and coffee. Izuku usually has a bit of coffee every morning. It helped him relax before school, and it helped with the nerves. It didn't taste the best, but he was all right with that. But today, there was a nagging inside his head telling him not to drink it. Well, there was someone who was nagging him. Come on, we both know you hate the taste, why not have tea instead? Cecilia whined. None of the others were here to argue with her, they were doing their own thing instead. Mom doesn't like it when I touch the tea, because it's expensive. More expensive than coffee beans? Not really. She usually buys the coffee for Itsuki, though, but he shares it with me. I drink a lot less of it than he does, so it's not really an issue. Well, I think you should treat yourself once in a while. Tea is much more refined anyways, and it tastes better. Izuku thought about it for a bit, before shrugging and grabbing a packet. He should be a bit more indulgent. The tea was refreshing, and he really did feel refined drinking it in a comfy lounge chair. Even if the chair was also his mom's. It was a good thing she had to work early today. It's loud at school today, and this time Izuku can't blame it all on his classmates. They're always incessantly chattering about nothing every single day before, during, and after class, but it's not just them being a problem today. Him having 4 whole extra people talking in his head really isn't helping his focus. Nerissa and Cecilia were having a spirited conversation about music, which was taking up the majority of his processing power, and Jurard and Ollie's sporadic interruptions at all the wrong moments were making him almost completely unable to do the simplest problems. Luckily, today the teacher had assigned independent work, so he could take a break to sort things out. Everyone, I think we need to have a discussion. Cecilia and Nerissa stopped their discussion, much to Izuku's relief, and even if he couldn't see it, he could feel their eyes on him. But he knew they were just giving him time to speak. I'm worried about having too many people talking in my head, especially going forwards from here. If I keep unlocking more of you at this rate, then you'll never have a clear head again? Cecilia helpfully supplied. Exactly. I love having you guys around, but I need space in my head to think, and you all are taking that up. So, to be brief, you guys need to take turns. Ollie pouted, but I like to hang out with everyone and see what's going on outside. What if I miss something important? That's why we need a good setup for this. I've been thinking about it, and I think 2, maybe 3 of you should be the max at once. 4 is already too much right now, but 3 is doable. And as for emergencies, I was going to say you could all show up, but as our numbers grow, that won't work out well. Narissa dismissed his worries. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Izuku. Having all of us for emergencies works for now, as long as some of us can stay quiet. Hey, I can be quiet. Ollie protested, pouting and denying the accusations. Not during my singing practice you can't. It was one time. Okay. I trust you, Ollie, you've been pretty quiet most of today anyways. Let's just agree to this plan and figure out who stays for today. Cecilia was the first to offer to leave. Well, I would like to continue my discussion with Narissa, so if that's causing problems for your focus, we should both leave you until after school. Narissa nodded her head in agreement. Izuku was getting better at visualizing their movements, even if they weren't visible. It was proof to him that their bond was strengthening. He could even feel as the two vacated the viewing room, as they decided to call it. Ollie followed behind soon after, saying something about getting back at Narissa. Izuku decided not to worry about it. That left him and Jurud. The two of them had been getting along well during training, and he had faith that he wouldn't be too distracting. He was glad, however, that Jurud paid more attention to his surroundings than Izuku was, since he noticed the incoming threat far quicker. Heads up, Izuku. Bakugo is coming over. Fast. Oh shit, thanks. That can't be good. He was able to save his papers from getting burnt just in time for Bakugo to slam his hand down on the desk, popping off a couple explosions for good measure. He didn't look happy. Deku, where have you been? Huh? What do you mean? After school, duh. You barely ever stick around anymore. Are you trying to avoid me or something? Hey, wait, I'm not Dash. And during class too, you're always staring into space, like you don't even see us. Do you think you're above me now? Is that it? Things were going sour quickly, and Izuku didn't want to end up with another injury. He needed to defuse this somehow. Kaken, I don't think that at all. Obviously you're better than me, how could someone like me hope to be better than someone like you? The best way he knew to get Bakugo off his case was to kill the mood. He still wanted to be friends with the blonde, but when he started pressing him like this, the best course of action was escape. I bet someone as strong as you wouldn't mind if I just disappeared forever. That way you'd always know you're above me. It was quieter when I didn't have you around. Maybe you should. Izuku had to bite his tongue to keep from shouting. His head was spinning, and he just stared in disbelief as Bakugo walked away. Yeah, he could be an a-hole, but this was new. Was this the end? Izuku thought it was. There was really no repairing a friendship, no matter how fragile it had been, after something like that. Kaken, you can't say something like that. What kind of person wishes for that kind of thing? Jurud grimaced inside his head. Aha. It's probably quieter because he doesn't have anyone to explode anymore. Not the time. I don't know what else to say to that, sorry. I think I just need to take my mind off him. I've still got to finish my work, after all. With everything that had been improving after he got his quirk, there was bound to be something that went to shit. His life could never take a turn for the better for too long. He couldn't keep it out of his mind. His words kept echoing throughout the day, it was a miracle he managed to stay focused. Jurud had told the others by now, and they all stopped by to give him some comforting words. It helped for sure, but he still felt like a part of his dream was gone. Bakugo was just not in the picture anymore. If this is how he was going to be, then Izuku would be happy to part ways. But he still thought about him anyway. Tossing away 14 years of a relationship wasn't easy, even if it was always on the verge of shattering to pieces. As he rode the train back home, he spotted Bakugo's home. He wondered what it would be like to visit again. Mom would probably drag him and Itsuki over sometime soon, but would he even pay him any mind? The train doors opened with a hiss, and Izuku made his way off the platform. He didn't like to take the train, because of Bakugo, but he wasn't waiting at the station anymore. Izuku wouldn't have to find safety in the alleys anymore, away from the burned scars. He really needed to focus on the positives. Focusing on the positives didn't help him focus on the car coming towards him, though. Well, the car was parked, he was the one approaching it. And smacking directly into it. There was a pitch-black sedan parked in front of his house. He wasn't told anyone was showing up, so this must be a surprise visit from Dad might be home. Izuku rushed up the steps. He had no idea if his hunch was right, but who cares if it was wrong. As he reached the door, he did not throw it open, since he didn't want a lecture from Mom. He was prepared to see a lot of things when he looked inside. Maybe he'd learn who his dad was, or it would be a family friend he hadn't seen in ages, or no one at all. What he wasn't expecting was, "Wah, Dr. Tsubasa." His family's doctor. Really? Izuku somehow managed to feel disappointment, despite being prepared for the worst. The doctor and his mother turned from their conversation to look at him. He could see Itsuki peek over from on the couch as well. Just the person I want to see. We were talking about you, you know. Dr. Tsubasa got up from his seat at the table, coming over to Izuku and shaking his hand. Izuku tried to focus on anything else in the room. The doctor creeped him out, always poking and prodding at him like he was a specimen to be observed instead of a person. Sure, quirkless people were rare, but he wasn't a zoo exhibit. The doctor didn't seem to pay any mind to his hesitance, keeping a cheery smile as the two of them went to sit at the table. Izuku wasn't keen on getting chewed out, so he went along with it. So, what brings you to the house? You don't seem like the type to drop in for no reason. Do I need a reason to see my favorite patient? Izuku held back from gagging. Gross. I suppose, but I don't think doctors do home visits often, especially without prior notice. Can't hide anything from you, HM? Well, I suppose I should get to it, then. Dr. Tsubasa leaned forward, hands clasped together under his chin. Izuku could suddenly feel his breath on his skin, and could smell how weirdly sterile the man was. Like a hospital. Your father wants to see you. Okay. What was going on today? He had been kinda excited to see if his father was here, but coming out of Dr. Tsubasa's mouth? The dread set in. He remembered all the rumors, all the things he had overheard Mom and Itsuki talk to him about. He did not want to see his father right now. But he didn't know how to wiggle out of this one. If he wants to see me, why send you, of all people? That's not a very nice thing to say about me, now is it? Sorry. He flashed his grin again, and Izuku shivered. I've come to fetch you because he wants to bring you back to his home, and as the person in charge of his health, he trusts me to bring you safely. In charge of his health? Yes. He's been unwell for a while now. I've been helping him get better. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Dr. Tsubasa was, well, a doctor. Why did he need to pause before saying unwell? Shouldn't he know better than anyone the state of his patient? I guess he trusts you a lot then, if he's willing to let you take care of him in his own house. We've known each other for a long time. It's natural that he trusts me. I guess that would make sense if you've been his doctor for a while. He figured that if Dad was close enough to Dr. Tsubasa to both have him in his own home and to assign him as Izuku's primary doctor as well, they must go way back. He wondered how far back that is, but the more concerning thing was that if the rumors about his dad were true, this doctor might be just as dangerous. Well, I've stalled long enough. He wants to see you at once, so why don't you come out to the car, once you've put away all your school materials? He vaguely gestured at Izuku's backpack, still on his back, before standing up and heading to the door. Don't be too long. Izuku slowly got up from the table, and looked at Mom. She was smiling creepily, so he looked elsewhere, towards Itsuki. They met eyes, and he looked away, but not before mouthing, good luck, to Izuku. Oh. Izuku didn't want to keep him waiting, more out of fear than any sense of obligation. So he dropped his stuff off quickly, and got in the car. The windows were very tinted, he now noticed, and anyone looking in wouldn't be able to see a thing. Dr. Tsubasa was talking about something, but he wasn't paying attention at all, too in his own head to care. We need to keep track of where he's taking us. I'll do it. Jurard volunteered. Everyone was at the front now, on high alert. This had the potential to go really poorly, so he needed to split his focus between the 5 of them. Nerissa was next to take a role. I've been listening to what he's saying, so you can ignore him for now. Thanks. I'll keep thinking of ways to get out of this if things really go bad. Ollie, Cecilia, can you two keep an eye out for anything suspicious? Especially once we get where we're going, if I miss something potentially dangerous. Of course, Izuku. You got it. The two were quick to oblige, and with that the tasks were divided. The nerves wouldn't fade, of course, but Izuku was getting better at operating under stress. At least, he told himself he could. He wasn't planning on doing anything too rash, like what happened when Ollie showed up. The car hummed as Izuku thought, and the doctor chattered along to himself. It wasn't the most distracting, but it bugged him in the back of his mind while he planned. I'm just going to think out loud, so you all can hear the plans too. Let's start with if he's alone, and turns out to be evil. I think in that case I can just use Jurard and shoot him in the head, but I'm not keen on committing murder. Depending on how strong he really is, I could use Cecilia as well, since her defense is strong and her lance can hit from mid-range. If he's with a group, on the other hand, Nerissa is probably the best pick. I can use her singing for mass hypnosis, or at least to stun them enough to run away. I'd get overwhelmed if I picked either of the other two. And finally, if I'm overpowered completely, I use Ollie and run. This is all assuming he has bad intentions in mind, But if he's really that strong, I need to just pray I can live with Ollie's regeneration. If he splatters my brain, though? I hope it doesn't get to that. I really like my brain. Ollie interjects, probably bored of looking out the dark windows for anything. I like my brain too. I can't really know what's going to happen until we get there, though. Well, we're about to find out. Jurard informed him, as the car came to a stop in front of a pretty normal-looking office building. I've got the path here memorized, so don't worry about that. Thanks so much. He tuned back into reality in time to catch what Dr. Tsubasa was saying. Well, here we are, Izuku. But we still have a small way left to travel. You don't know how to get down to your father, so I'll have to show you the way. He looked pleased with himself. Maybe he liked being relied on? More importantly, why did they have to go down? The two entered the building, and the door shut behind them with a soft click. Izuku didn't hear the lock engage. The more flights of stairs they descended, the worse the nerves got. The air was stale, and he could feel the sweat collecting on his palms. He wiped them on his pants for the 100th time, just praying that it would end soon. Why are we going so far down? Why does he even need to be down here? Your father is a careful man. Dr. Tsubasa didn't say anything more. He'd been silent since the start of the descent, but he wasn't afraid like Izuku. He looked more like he was concerned, wearing a small frown as he contemplated something. Izuku peered down the center of the stairwell, and saw the bottom this time. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. It didn't help with the slight tremble in his hands, or the way his eyes darted around as they finally left the stairwell, into what looked to be a laboratory. It was a more traditional lab, white and sterile, with a lot of glassware and machines for doing who knows what. Well, Izuku could figure out some of them, but there were others that eluded him. What he didn't like was what he could see through the doors leading out in various directions. There wasn't anyone else down here, but he could see massive test tubes, and what he saw inside some of them, they were alive, maybe? He didn't want to think about it. It looked gross. He wondered again why no one else was here. With the amount of effort it must have taken to get the lab this far underground, and the scale of the place, one would assume there would be more staff. This couldn't all be Dr. Tsubasa's? Or could it? He didn't get any more time to ponder that. They had arrived at a room tucked away in the back of the complex, past a multitude of doors and hallways. There was a plaque next to the door that read, Medical Facility. The door opened, and Izuku's eyes had to adjust to the pitch black inside. The doctor stopped at the doorway, and beckoned for him to enter. I'll leave you here. He wants to speak with you alone. The door clicked shut. He heard the lock this time. His eyes were finally starting to adjust to the dark, able to make out a figure sitting upright on a bed, with cables attached from it to some machines nearby. The lights came on, and Izuku winced, needing to adjust again. It was quicker this time. Now he could see the figure clearly, and it wasn't pretty. His face was scarred horribly above the mouth, to the point where his eyes weren't even visible, and he was plugged into too many medical machines injecting who knows what. Izuku was surprised he was even able to sit up. But more than anything he was scared. For someone to have taken that bad of an injury to the head, close to the brain, and lived? So you must be my father? The man smiled with teeth. It wasn't comforting at all. Correct. You can call me Hisashi Midoriya. It's nice to see you again after so long. Why didn't you visit before, then? I would have liked to see you at least a little, even if you were busy. Well, I had to wait, of course. I was planning on waiting a little more for you to truly understand, but recent events have forced me to contact you earlier. Speaking of that, Izuku's hands clenched. Just from the way he spoke, he could tell his father was bad news. But recent events was a terrible sign. Oh Kami, does he know about you all? I've been informed that you have been frequenting Dagoba Beach lately. And maybe not? Hisashi leaned forwards in his hospital bed. Your mother has been keeping me up to date, and she says you never gave up on that dream of yours. So I must know, are you still chasing after becoming a hero? This might be worse. I need to stick to my beliefs, though. Why yes. I still want to be a hero that saves people with a smile. Izuku was scared to look, but he could see the frown of disapproval on his father's face. I see. But how could someone like you ever hope to become a hero? You think that hard work is going to make up for what you're lacking? So he had no hopes for him either. Izuku knew inside that it was the case, but he still wanted to believe. This was it, though. He had no one else to turn to except himself. But despite it all, he knew he had to keep his conviction. Maybe I can't be All Might, Izuku saw a flicker of annoyance cross Hisashi's face, but I still want to save people. The man sighed. So you want to continue on this path? Frankly, I don't understand why you still chase this unattainable dream, but I will still give you this choice. Izuku mentally braced. He didn't want to consider the possibility, but he felt he knew what was coming. If you choose to forsake heroism and join me in my quest to reshape the world, let us say, I will grant you a quirk. You'll what? Ha! The four in his head exclaimed, in perfect harmony, surprisingly. Hisashi Midoriya considered himself to be very meticulous, and for his standards, this plan, or experiment, was quite thorough. He had started formulating it when the twins were in the womb, and he wasn't able to detect a quirk factor in one. The child was just like his own brother, but this time, he had more control over it. For a quirkless child in today's world, life wouldn't be easy, and many either came to resent the world, or to leave it. Hisashi was planning on exploiting the former. He had the family relocated close to Inko's old friend, who had conceived a child months prior. One with a very powerful quirk, sure to be praised at every turn. Someone for Izuku to grow jealous of. The abuse he faced from Katsuki Bakugo was just a bonus, one that Hisashi appreciated. Once the quirkless diagnosis came in, one that he had Dr. Garaki dramatized to further wound the boy, he silently retreated from Izuku's life. Having one parent leave you and the other seemingly give up on you was bound to mess with his mental state. He needed him to develop in such a way that he would have nothing to cling to except for his hatred. But there was a snag, one that Hisashi should have seen. Izuku had been a strong child mentally, and he was glad for that, since he wouldn't have to worry about pushing him to suicide, but he had been too strong. He had clung to the thought of becoming a hero, and never let go. Hisashi thought that he was slipping recently, but his passion seemed to have come back in full force. And so he pivoted. If he couldn't break the boy, then he needed to give him exactly what he wanted, for a price. Don't shout, now. I'll give you a chance to become something more. But I will not entertain such foolish thoughts of heroism. Why? If you can give me a quirk, then why not let me chase my dream? And why didn't you give me one earlier? I wouldn't have had to suffer if you had. Suffering builds character, Izuku, and I needed to snuff the light out of your starry eyes. I will rule over all of Japan as its demon king, as I am destined to, so why would I let a hero like you stand in my way? Izuku stuttered as he stared at him in horror. Hisashi liked that look, but he knew that he would give in eventually. He knew Izuku was desperate to become someone that wouldn't be beaten into the dirt. He would accept his role with time. Every quirkless he had granted power to, no matter how just they may think they are, always bent. So what will it be? Will you accept a quirk from me, and let me hone you into a blade sharp enough to split Japan in two? Or will you die a miserable death, loved by no one, never able to achieve anything? ... The two stared at each other. Hisashi was willing to give him a moment to think it over, of course, but the outcome was a quirk. Izuku took a deep breath, finally unclenching his fist. There were red marks where his nails had dug into his palms. But he looked calm for the first time since he had arrived. There was no trembling, no shaky breathing. Just a glare leveled directly into Hisashi's eyes. I don't need trash like that. He slammed his hands against the rails of the hospital bed. You ungrateful little sheet. Do you think your dreams will save you from reality? I'll stand by my morals and my ambitions no matter what. Because I will be a hero. And you'll die for your ambitions. He shouted, his throat hoarse. He raised his right arm, and it grew, contorting grotesquely as muscle, metal, and energy interwove to create something inhuman. A blunt force object, perfect for splattering a foolish child across the walls. Said child winced as he stared up at it, seemingly regretting his decision, but it was too late for apologies. He swung down, accelerating his arm to high speeds, intent on leaving nothing but a stain. When it impacted the floor, chunks of concrete and rebar flew every which way, some embedding themselves in the machinery. But there was no blood. He felt no squishy human crushed under the blow. There was no more Izuku in the room. Why did he say that? Okay. He needed to calm down. Yeah, he could have just accepted and been safe, but he's gonna finally become someone. He's putting in the work to improve and gain skill with all his other forms. He really needs a name for them. But that being said, how the hell was he gonna get out of this? Ollie. Izuku, I don't think I can recover from being splattered. I have to try anyway, though. Alright, well get to it, he's about to kill us all. Izuku was already stepping away, trying to get out of range of whatever Dad had made his arm into. He was going to have to throw away the element of surprise now, transform, and hope he could maybe get the jump on him. Maybe he could have accepted the offer and killed him from up close, or he could have bailed way earlier, but now was not the time for regrets. He focused his mind and pulled, trying to become Ollie and maybe survive this hit. But there was something in the way. Or someone. There was no time to change course, so he just accepted whatever was being given, and transformed. His body felt fuzzy? Not like it was covered in fur, more like TV static. He felt floaty as well, like gravity wasn't working right. It was making him a bit lightheaded. But Hisashi's arm swung down all the same, and it had course-corrected right to where Izuku had been standing, slamming down on top of him. And yet, despite the arm being exactly where Izuku was, he was not crushed, nor splattered, nor even slightly harmed. In fact, he was standing inside the arm. Two things aren't supposed to exist in the same space at once, but perhaps he wasn't there. Which one of you? Me. A new voice called out from inside his head. We can do introductions later, you need to go. Izuku didn't need to be told twice. He ran, floated out of the room, straight through the door. So he was incorporeal, got it. He could hear his dad start screaming in rage as he left, and saw Dr. Tsubasa rush inside soon after, looking right at him but not seeing him at all. The doctor shouted a name he didn't recognize. Izuku kept running away. This time, he could see into the rooms more clearly. There were bodies. So many bodies. He didn't recognize them, and he couldn't save them either. He just had to keep running. He was able to ascend straight up the stairwell, peering up at the bright light hanging at the top. The light hurt his eyes, but he refused to look down. And then he was out, through the doors and onto the streets once again. He only made it a few blocks before an intense wave of nausea hit him, and he ducked into an alley, exiting his incorporeal state and collapsing onto the ground, tears streaming down his cheeks. He threw up, and cried some more. It was dark out by now. He should have been at home, eating dinner. Maybe Mom would get mad over a tiny mistake. Maybe Itsuki would take his medicine for himself instead of asking. He curled up on the cement. It's too late for all that now, the new voice spoke up. Who are you? Why is this happening to me? My name is Mint Phantom. I'm afraid I can't answer your second question, though. Izuku looked at himself. He was wearing a minty green maid outfit, though it had been dirted by the ground in the alley. And you're a ghost, huh? The name makes sense. Hee. He kept crying as he got up, legs trembling softly. His heart ached, he didn't want to believe what was happening, but he walked anyway, slowly towards the street, halting as he reached the exit. I can't be me anymore, can I? He didn't get a response. None of them wanted to say anything. You're still me, but I can't be Izuku. He'll find me, eventually. He paused, looking up. The moon shined down on him. But that doesn't mean I have to stop being myself, does it? I've got nothing left, now. But I also have no reason to hold myself back anymore. I have to keep moving forward towards my goals, at full force, to stay true to myself. Do you think we'll live to see that through? Narissa was worried about him, but he had to look at the positives. We have to. There's simply no other way left to go. Izuku stepped out of the alleyway, and walked away from the neighborhood he'd lived his entire life in. There was no room for someone like him here. He'd have to carve out his own space elsewhere, and carve a new version of himself, too. Omake 4, regrets. Izuku didn't come to school the next day. There was an empty desk in front of his own. Katsuki didn't like that. So the quirkless loser finally decided to leave for good. Good riddance. One of the guys that followed him around. They seemed to get more joy out of watching Izuku squirm than he ever did. The other was saying similarly mocking words, but Katsuki tuned them out. This was his fault, right? He was the one who told him to disappear yesterday. He had meant it at the time, but now? He had effed up, and he couldn't undo this one. He just had to hope the nerd showed up again tomorrow. But he never just skipped school, and Itsuki would have told him if he was sick. Itsuki also looked a bit worse for wear today, but Katsuki just got ignored, like usual, so he didn't pry. Maybe he should have, though. Oh Kami, why couldn't he just hold his tongue? Toshinori Yagi sat on the bench across from Dagoba Beach, as he had been for the past month. He'd watched as the piles upon piles of trash had slowly been whittled down by young Midoriya. He was glad to have gotten his name, so he could have someone to thank once it was gone. But recently, the pile hadn't so much as budged, and the hard-working boy had disappeared. Toshinori was concerned, to say the least. He could see the drive in Midoriya's eyes and how he always moved with a purpose, even from afar. He didn't seem like the type to give up so suddenly, and in fact he hadn't given any signs of slowing down at all. The two of them had spoken right before he had stopped showing, where Toshinori had apologized about bringing up quirks during their first interaction. At that time, he had seemed so passionate, so to see him just leave? It was odd. The thing that really made him worry, however, was the schedule. The boy was very punctual, always arriving early in the morning on weekends, and late in the afternoon on weekdays. He was usually able to get there just as young Midoriya was because of this. He had expected him to be late sometimes, or to slow down as he got closer to the end, but to see all progress halt completely was ringing alarm bells in his head. To him, the piles looked like an abandoned project, one that he still wanted to see through. Toshinori was considering the site for training his future successor, but he didn't want to interrupt young Midoriya's project before he knew what had happened. Not like he had a successor picked yet, anyways. Maybe that's why, when he got back to Might Tower, he didn't go to sleep immediately, booting up a computer instead. He put Midoriya Izuku into their civilian database, and got a match with an address immediately. Okay, maybe it was a little weird to go looking up a child's address. More than a little, actually. But Toshinori was concerned. If young Midoriya didn't show on Saturday, he was going to just drive past and see if anyone was home, that's all. Not creepy at all. He closed the computer and tried to get some sleep, to take his mind off everything. He didn't show up on Saturday. Toshinori figured this would happen, but he wasn't about to pretend he wasn't hoping to see the kid again. The pattern had been going for too long, at this point he had to accept that young Midoriya wasn't coming back. The drive over to the address was slow, and every red light dragged on for ages. He felt surprisingly tense for such a non-threatening situation. There wasn't heavy traffic, luckily, but the address was quite the distance from the beach. He wondered how early Izuku had to wake to arrive at the time he did. Toshinori was expecting the lights to be on when he arrived, for any sign of life. And even if there wasn't, he thought that he might see a car, or some sort of personal belongings outside the house. What he saw instead made the sudden disappearance make sense, but why hadn't the boy brought it up during their last conversation? There was a raven outside the house, staring directly at the car. It was seated on top of a white sign stuck in the grass that read, "For sale." The shadows in the alleys felt like they would swallow him whole, creeping up his body as he walked through them, frantically looking every which way in case someone recognized him or was after him. It was cold, and the goosebumps on his skin didn't help the paranoia that someone, somehow, was after him. In just a few hours, he'd covered a great distance, making sure to stay under the covers of dark alleys and unlit streets. Muzutafu was a large city, but he was almost on the opposite side of the place. He couldn't bring himself to leave, but he needed to be as far away from Dad and home as possible. We could have gotten so much further out, if only going incorporeal with Mint's body didn't make me sick. Izuku was doing his best not to be loud, so even if he was alone, he was still talking in his head only. Mint at least felt bad for him. Sorry. I had no idea that living people can't handle becoming untethered from reality, that's my bad. I've been dead for so long, and no living person has done this before. It's okay. You don't have to apologize. Just, let me know if any of you see a good spot to sleep. What about that one? Jurud interjected. I can't see what you're looking at. Right, yeah. On your left, the one with the broken door. On his left, he noticed what looked like an old apartment building. The door was hanging by a single hinge, and when he went to open it, said hinge disintegrated, and the door smacked him in the head before clattering to the ground. Ow! He yelped, before shutting his mouth and quickly stepping inside. Whoops, yeah, this place looks pretty run down. I'd rather be a squatter in a place no one's going to than live on the streets. Plus, the streets are dirty and wet and gross. I don't want to make a mess of my clothes. Ollie, your clothes already looked shredded and destroyed, I don't think dirt is going to change much. Cecilia helpfully pointed out. He couldn't see it, but he knew Ollie was pouting again. It's a fashion statement. I made them like this on purpose. Didn't you tell me before that it was like that when you came out of the grave? SSHHHH. Don't tell them that. Sure. While that exchange was taking place, Izuku was looking through the building. Most of the rooms were in poor shape, but as he walked up to the third floor, he saw a room that looked relatively put together. Swinging the door open, which did not fall off its hinges, he found a room that didn't have any water damage. Yay! And also? A futon. It doesn't look stained or rotted, either. This might be where we hole up for the foreseeable future. It's not awful, I guess. Better than nothing. Narissa said, with a twinge of worry in her voice. Now, you should get to sleep, so we can talk more in the dreamscape. Izuku was dead tired, so he wasn't about to complain or try to stay up. He just plopped down on the futon, and fell asleep the second his eyes closed. It had been a long day. This was the first time two buildings had been attached to one another in the dreamscape. Usually there was some distance, but Cecilia's lounge connected seamlessly to the new cafe that came with Mint. It was a cute place, and the sight of where they were going to figure out what to do now. Izuku sat down at one of the booths, and slumped over the table. The other 5 took up seats in the booth as well, so everyone had to squish pretty close together. You all know there are more seats you could sit in, right? Ollie scooted in close next to him, and wrapped her arm around his chest, lifting him from off the table and hugging him to her side. Well, it's more fun this way. You get to hang out with all your friends at the same time. At least someone was in high spirits. He leaned his head on her shoulder, not just because it was comfortable, but to avoid getting smacked by the sword in her head. Well, we need to figure some things out now, so what do we talk about first? Your disguise is the most pressing issue right now. Cecilia started them off, taking a sip from some tea that Mint had procured for the group. The question to ask is which of us is the best for surviving on your own long term. Nerissa immediately raised her hand. I'm excluding myself from this. I don't think Izuku has it in him to act like me convincingly. He had to agree, considering a 15-year-old doesn't know too much about being an adult woman. I'm also excluding Ollie, because she's a zombie. This got an annoyed huff from the girl in question, but Izuku knew she understood. People weren't the most accepting of quirks that made the user look weird, and a zombie quirk would probably lead to just as much harassment as being quirkless. So Ollie was a no-go. If we're going in order of when you arrived, then what about Jurard? Izuku turned his gaze to the bounty hunter, who simply held up his pistols. If you can get a gun license, then I'm an option. Otherwise you'd have to open carry and somehow get away with it. Well, I could just leave the guns at home, but let's see if there's a better option. Cecilia? Everyone turned to look at her, who was still preoccupied with drinking tea. She glanced back at them. Izuku took his head off Ollie's shoulder and leaned forwards, resting his chin on his hands. Do you have something in mind, Izuku? Cecilia asked, clearly not ready for everyone's attention. Do you have to eat or drink? Or is it optional as an automaton? Well, Cecilia looked down at her tea. I suppose not. I need to refuel every so often, but just drinking water or tea is usually enough. I prefer to eat, of course. Izuku leaned back in the booth. Ideally we can reduce the amount of stuff I need to live as much as possible, until I'm back on my feet. So not having to eat or drink often is good. Also, being an artificial being means she's probably pretty durable too, Mint remarked, refilling Cecilia's teacup. I think she's the best choice. At least, she's a better choice than me in this case. Don't want you getting nauseous again. Right, so she's low maintenance and takes a lot to break. She's also got a good weapon for self-defense. Izuku glanced around the booth. So are we all in agreement that Cecilia is the best choice? He was met with a chorus of yes and nodding. Great. Now, what else do we need to discuss? It can't just be that, can it? Everyone looked around the booth, but it seemed like there wasn't actually another thing to discuss. At least, until Jurard spoke up. Actually, I've got something that's been bugging me. You know how when you, turn into us? Yes? What about it? I think we need a real name for when you use our. I'm not gonna finish that sentence, actually. You see the problem? Jurard scratched his neck and looked away, but Izuku got the idea. A new name for that? I should have done this earlier for sure, but I don't have any ideas. He leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. Ollie poked her head into his view, and waved her hand over his eyes. What about taking on our appearance? Mint offered. I think that's a little too long. How about disguise? That was Nerissa. I wouldn't say you all are disguises. You're just as me as I am. Persona? Cecilia proposed. I feel like I've heard that one somewhere before. Ollie got up in his face. How's identity sound? That's actually pretty good. You all are just different me's, so taking on your identity makes sense. Izuku started to sit back up, but almost bonked his head into Ollie's, so he just laid there instead. I guess that's settled now too. Is that everything? This time, no one spoke up. All right, then. Meeting adjourned. Izuku mocked hitting a gavel on the table, and everyone started filtering out. Mint went to the back of the cafe, which Izuku hadn't yet seen, but he decided to leave that for later. Ollie and Jurard left together, chatting about something he couldn't make out. That left him, Cecilia, and Nerissa. Cecilia was still finishing her tea, and since both of them were going to train him to use their weapons, Nerissa was waiting patiently. Nerissa's staff and Cecilia's spear were similar enough to where joint training would make things faster overall. It was quiet. He knew Cecilia liked it that way, but he really didn't want to be alone with his thoughts right now. Things were just going so awfully, and ugh. The tears started to flow again. He gripped the table with trembling hands, and he could feel little droplets impacting his pants. His head slowly lowered down, and his legs came to his chest instinctively as he curled up. He was so scared. Scared of dying alone on the streets after coming this far? Was he even good enough to? He felt arms around his waist, and then he was being picked up, before being set down on someone's lap. It was Nerissa, he noticed, as he hesitantly leaned into her hug. It's gonna be okay, Izuku. so you can cry all you need to. We'll still be here. His hold on her slowly tightened as he let himself lean into her chest, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He could feel her breathing and her hands in his hair, could hear Cecilia moving around the table to sit next to them and holding one of his hands in hers. The tears were flowing in full force now, but he didn't feel the urge to stop them anymore. It had been a while since he felt comfortable enough to really cry. Sometimes, back at home, he would sob into his pillow, but he'd never even considered that he could be comforted. Mom would just ignore him if she found out, or beat him if he was too loud. As the tears slowly faded, Nerissa slowly lifted his head, and wiped away the excess from the corners of his eyes. He almost started crying again, not sure how to react to this level of kindness. I am sorry for getting tears on your sea clothes. Nerissa held his hands, softly massaging them. Don't worry about something as trivial as that. What matters is that you're feeling okay. Thank you so much. Of course. Cecilia scooted over a spare teacup she had filled with the last of the tea. Have something to drink. Herbal tea always makes me feel more at ease. Slowly, he picked up the cup and brought it to his mouth, careful not to let his still shaking hand spill any. She was right, though. The tea was soothing, and he felt his breath return to normal as he leaned back onto Nerissa, just relaxing. I'll leave you two for now. I need to go fetch some stuff for training, so take however long you need, and then meet me outside. She ruffled his hair, before heading over to the lounge. Nerissa continued to hold him close, and they kept a calm silence. This time, Izuku felt comfortable. You'd better get used to the feel of my spear, since you'll have it on you almost always from now on. Izuku held the spear, noting how heavy it was. He'd need to account for that, but for now he swung it around to get used to the weight, promptly smacking it into his head when he tried spinning it. Nerissa laughed at him. I should stop messing around and actually practice. Cecilia nodded. All right, then. I want you to land a hit on me, that's all. It's this kind of training, huh? Izuku slowly shifted the spear in his hands, staring down Cecilia. If you already know what's up, then we can get right. She quickly swerved to the side as Izuku sent out a quick stab. Sneaky. Izuku got to attacking. He wasn't just randomly swinging the spear around, he knew enough to realize that he needed to stab more than slash. At first, though, he held the spear near its end, trying to squeeze as much distance out of his pokes as possible. But, gah! Izuku dropped the point of the spear on the ground. It's so heavy, I keep dropping it. Cecilia stopped for a moment, a short distance away. Hold it closer to the point. Most of the weight is in the metal tip, so the center of gravity is further up the... Oh, right. Izuku should have guessed that. He repositioned, grabbing the spear further up the... It was still heavy, but the tip's weight wasn't dragging as much. He couldn't get as much distance, though. Well, he'd think about that later. Back to stabbing. This time, he was able to attack a lot more accurately, but Cecilia was still getting away. She was trained, after all, so she must be competent in dodging, but it's still sked to not land a single blow. So if he was getting used to the spear's weight, then the problem must be his own ability. Or, well, agility. He needed to not just get good at handling the spear, but moving well with it. Cecilia had picked up on his thoughts, and instead of just dodging around randomly, she started running away. Get back here. Izuku followed in hot pursuit, spear held tightly as the two of them ran around the dreamscape. Yeah, there wasn't that much here, but it was enough to make the chase enjoyable. Cecilia weaved through the pavilion, jumping over railings and downstairs. She even chucked the microphone stand at him, which Nerissa promptly shouted at her for. Then, they entered the lounge. It was a surprisingly spacious place, with multiple floors and quite a few pieces of furniture to dodge. They ran around chairs, tables, bookshelves, and more, and even on top of them sometimes. Izuku got more than a few books thrown at his face as well. Cecilia really liked throwing things at him, huh? Eventually, they went up to the second floor. There wasn't much up there, it was just a balcony, and... Oh, don't tell me. Cecilia jumped off, back down to floor 1. You've gotta be kidding me. Izuku glanced over to the stairs for a second, but he could afford to take some risks. He backed up, before rushing towards the drop. He jumped, planting his feet squarely on the railing, and jumped once more, pointing the spear straight down. Cecilia looked up in surprise, and barely moved out of the way as Izuku slammed to the ground, spear cracking the floor somewhat. And he promptly fell over, groaning in pain. Cecilia burst into laughter, leaning against a nearby chair. I didn't think you'd actually jump. Izuku rolled onto his back, glaring up at her. Then, why'd you do it? She walked over, picking him up and slinging his arm over her shoulder. Because I can. You can't, but you did it anyway. I thought you'd have a little more self-preservation. Sorry. Don't be, that was fun. But let's end here for now. You're getting used to my spear, so I'll be able to teach you some proper technique soon. Izuku weakly pumped his fist in the air. Yay! It was at that moment that Ollie and Jurard showed up, dragging a large whiteboard behind them. Izuku had seen it before in Jurard's office. He had no idea how they even got it out the door. Izuku, are you busy? Ollie shouted from across the void. I mean, not anymore? Perfect. Ollie ran up to the two, Jurard in tow with the board. We wanted to teach you something too. Well, it better not be physical. I am tired after all that running around. Jurard finally reached the other three. Don't worry, you can sit down for this one. Ollie wanted to teach you to speak Indonesian, and I figured I'd teach you Filipino as well, since the two are pretty similar anyways. Oh, that sounds fun. I already know Japanese and I'm sort of fluent in English, so I think I can handle 2 more. Or 1.5 more, if they really are that similar. Yay! Then let's go to the lounge. Ollie came up to Izuku and picked him up, bridal style. He handed the spear back to Cecilia, before burying his face in his hands as he was carried off. Jurard followed, still dragging the whiteboard. For languages, huh? Izuku figured that as he unlocked more identities, he might learn more languages. And, come to think of it, Cecilia knew German, didn't she? That was pretty similar to English? This might get out of hand, but being a self-taught polyglot would be interesting. It would be good to pass the time, at least. Light beamed through the window and straight into his eyes as he woke up, rolling over to avoid it. He probably needed to move the futon somewhere else. As he covered his eyes with his hand, he realized he was still using Mint's identity, and quickly swapped over to Cecilia's. As he got up, he realized how odd her body felt. She was an automaton, not a human, so there were some immediate differences. He could feel the doll joints clacking against each other. His skin felt off, since it was just a cover for the mechanical insides, and speaking of insides, he could never feel his internal organs as a human, but he could notice when they were gone. It was an odd sensation. His face was the only part of him that still felt human, due to the fluids in his eyes and mouth, that weren't real bodily fluids, but lubricant. Still, it was the most familiar part. Would he need lubricant for his joints? Only every couple weeks. Cecilia supplied. What kinds of lubricant do they need? Any oil you can get your hands on will work, so will any product designed for doors, or other moving parts. You know, the spray cans. Right, so nothing too special. That's good. I'm not that high maintenance, I promise. The most you need is high-quality tea, I presume? Cecilia giggled. You know me so well. I'd be happy to make tea for you anytime. Mint offered, and Izuku could tell she was happy. It's been so long since I've had someone so appreciative of what I make. Izuku tuned out their discussion as they turned to debating tea flavors. He wasn't going to get his hands on any anytime soon, so he focused on his new home. It was barren. Just a futon and a closet, really. And he didn't have any clothes to put in said closet. He didn't want to steal, but he didn't want to live in such an ugly room if he didn't have to. Maybe if he looked through the other rooms, he could find some furniture? And beyond that, he was sure that he could find stuff out behind furniture stores and in dumps like Dagoba Beach. People really do just toss perfectly usable things for no good reason. His heels clicked against the concrete as he walked through the halls, peering through doors to see if there was anything salvageable, and there really wasn't much. The first floor looked completely ransacked and the second was too, although he was able to find a couple chairs. He had already looked through most of the third floor last night, so he knew it was barren, and the fourth had only a table intact. Everything above the fifth floor was emitting a terrible smell, and he really didn't want to be near whatever was causing it, so he stopped early. It took him a couple minutes to get the table through the doorway. He sat down at the table, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't even sure why he brought 2 chairs, no one was going to come over anyway. If he wanted more furniture, or decorations, he'd need to leave the apartments. Was that a good idea to do during the day? Other than the fact that he was scavenging during the day, none of his identities were particularly subtle. They'd all draw attention, so he couldn't really go out without being watched, or if he got unlucky, followed. Hey, you two. Should I just return to the dreamscape for now? I don't really have a reason to be awake right now. Not gonna try and get used to my body? I can do that at night, when I go out for more stuff. Well, I'd like to spend more time with you, so my vote is you come back. Izuku was more than happy to spend some time with Mint, so he laid his head down onto the futon once again, drifting off into slumber. Izuku was not stealing. Definitely. Taking things from back alleys and dump sites was probably not against the law, but he wasn't about to risk it. That's why he was out in the dead of night, rummaging through piles to find a bed frame and mattress. Sure, the futon was passable, but if he could be more comfortable, he would do his best to get it. Without stealing, of course. Bingo. Something caught his eye from under the pile he was sifting through, and he slowly pulled it out. It was a mattress, somehow unripped despite being in a pile of sharp objects. It was also small, but he could make do. He'd given up on finding a bed frame, and decided to come back later and make one himself out of wood, but for now he just wanted something to put the futon on. Now, how was he getting this back home? No clue. Came the answer from the others. Great. After an hour of trying to figure that out, Izuku decided he hated mattresses. It was floppy and heavy, and awful to try and carry. But he did it regardless, thanking Cecilia for having a strong enough body to just carry it on his back. It finally went down on the floor of his new room, and the futon went on top. That's one step forward. Seems like we're on a pretty good pace, then. Mint exclaimed. She was looking at things from a more positive perspective than Izuku was, but they needed someone to have hope. It'll take a while before we can really be comfortable, but we can't stop until we reach that. It's gonna be just training and living day to day for a while. Who knows how long? What even is the end goal? How are we going to get out of this? Cecilia was more worried, and Izuku couldn't agree more. He wasn't sure what they were working towards yet, but he just needed to get by right now. He sat back down at the table. He wasn't going to eat anything, or have a nice conversation with a friend that wasn't in his head. He was alone, but that wasn't all bad. It was time to focus on himself. Recovery was a slow process, and he needed this time. Omega 5, out of sync. Izuku stretched as he woke up. It had been a week since everything started, and he was already settling into a rhythm. Walking to the window, he cracked it open to watch the sunrise. The orange and pink hues slowly faded as the sun set, but he could have sworn it was. Hey, Nerissa? HM? What's up? Have I become nocturnal? I don't know how to tell you this, but... Izuku groaned. Being too scared to be seen in public really did mess with him, huh? For the past weeks, Izuku's life had been a loop. He slept during the day, either training with Cecilia and Nerissa, keeping up with his studies, or resting. And during the night, he was out scavenging for his apartment. It was predictable, slow, and a bit boring, but it was comfortable, and that's what he needed right now. Rummaging through garbage wasn't what he would usually classify as comfortable, though. And yet, for the 5th time this week, he found himself there, looking for decorations. People threw out a lot of good stuff, so he usually couldn't take everything he found at once, hence the return trips. That didn't change the fact that he was sifting through garbage a lot. Hopefully he didn't smell that bad. He tried to shower when he could, but the water only flowed sometimes. There were drawbacks to living in a run-down building. He was dumping things into a duffel bag he had found a few days prior as he searched. So far he had found a whole string of lights, some bed sheets, and a few plushies that he'd have to deep clean. He also found a rather odd figurine. He made sure to break that one. And just now, he had stumbled across a well-crafted wooden statue of a tanuki. Izuku had to wonder what brought people to throw out things like this. It was clearly made by a craftsman, and with care, so it was sad to see it ended up in the hands of someone so unappreciative. He placed it in the bag with the other objects, and started back. Something about it felt familiar, but he'd figure that out later. Jurard, did I miss anything? Jurard was the only one watching right now, so Izuku had him looking out for anything of interest. Not this time, no. I was gonna point out the statue, but you saw that. Ah. Alright then. Time to head back and get clean. Yay! Yay! Usually it was pretty quiet on his walk back to the apartments. He went out at night for a reason. Just him, the animals, and the streetlights. That's why he almost jumped out of his skin when he heard a scream pierce the air as he approached home. Well, could he even call this skin? It was synthetic, and his real body was mechanical, and, semantics aside, he dropped the duffel bag in a dark spot on the sidewalk and bolted towards the noise. Maybe he could help? As he approached the alley, however, he saw someone get slammed against the wall, fall down, and not get up. Judging by their costume, they were a pro, but not one he recognized. Maybe he couldn't help? Oh? A voice came from the shadowed side of the alley. Another hero came to back up her friend? I'd love to teach you a lesson as well. Never mind, it's too late. Helping time. Izuku gripped the lance and ran in. The shadowed figure swung, a katana? He blocked it with the shoving back towards the attacker, before moving the lance towards his body. The figure jumped back, into the light, and he could finally get a good look. He looked raggedy, sorta. His clothes themselves were rough around the edges, and torn up in spots, but the outfit altogether made his look quite scary. The blood-stained katana wasn't helping his nerves, either. I don't know who you are, but you'd better watch out. That wasn't Izuku, it was the hero on the ground. Apparently he had the strength to speak, but not to get up? That man is the hero killer. That wasn't ominous at all. Izuku's eyes flicked back to the hero killer. He certainly looked the part. The hero continued. He paralyzed me. I don't know how, but I can't move anything but my face. Then I won't have to ask you to stay put. I'll try to keep you safe until you can move. Izuku assumed a fighting stance. Mentally, he drew a line in the alleyway that just about lined up with a doorway near the exit. He wouldn't let this hero killer pass that line. While I do enjoy the title of hero killer, my name is Stain. I'll make sure you don't forget it, fake hero. He charged. Usually in a fight with weapons, you'd get something like, their blades clashed with a clang or something to that effect, but a lance and a katana can't quite do that. Izuku's lance had a lot of metal at the tip, so he might be able to block a few slashes, but that wasn't reliable. To put it simply, he was playing defense, either dodging entirely or throwing out a stab when he got an opening. Luckily, he was good at defense. Nerissa and Cecilia were good at beating him up, and so was his mother, so he was pretty mobile. Stain swung at him once again, and he dodged to the right, back slamming against the wall. He ducked another swing, katana bouncing off the wall right above, and surged forward, slamming his head into Stain's gut. He sent out a stab as Stain fell back, grazing his side. At least, he thought it did, but it just tore through his outfit. The hero killer was skinnier than he looked. Bad news, Stain was closer to the imaginary line. Good news, he was now preoccupied with Izuku, choosing to charge him instead of going for the killing blow. Izuku backed further into the alley, trying to put some distance between the two, to little success. Stain closed the gap with frightening speed, and his katana glanced off the tip of the lance. He barely weaved out of the way of the blow, and took his hand off to just punch him in the face. Even in a more favorable position, Izuku was still relentlessly pushed back by slash after slash, until he eventually screwed up. Stain's sword came down hard on his shoulder and bounced right off. Stain looked at him incredulously. What are you made of? I'm an automaton. Can't you tell by the joints? Izuku held up his wrist, shaking it a bit. I couldn't see that. It's too dark. I see, he stared back for a bit, before smiling. Then I don't really need to defend myself, do I? Stain tensed, gripping his katana. He swung down once again, this time with a bit more power, but rather than back off, Izuku just weaved, striking him cleanly in the side with a quick stab. Don't you know, Stain, that the best defense is a good offense? You've got a bit more going for you than those other pathetic fakes. I'll really need to get serious. You weren't serious already? Stain didn't respond to that one, instead deciding to jump high into the air, onto a nearby fire escape. He cut an entire chunk of the railing off, chucking it at Izuku. He dodged out of the way, and it ricocheted off the floor and walls, before smacking the downed hero in the head. It was already slow enough to not do any damage, but the man's grunt of pain was kinda funny. It was funny until Stain turned his focus to the hero. Right, the line he had to defend. He backed towards the hero as Stain leapt off the fire escape and onto the dumpster, looming over the two. Izuku kicked the dumpster. Stain fell off the dumpster. He looked at Izuku for a second, before narrowly avoiding another stab. His lance bounced off the concrete as his opponent got to his feet, and was barely able to bat away another slash. Letting the next slash harmlessly bounce off his side, he sent another quick stab forwards, aiming for the shoulder, but Stain pivoted once again, grabbing his head and shoving him to the side. His back hit the dumpster with force, making a crash way louder than he was expecting. Stain just looked away and rushed the still paralyzed hero, sword primed to kill. Izuku knew he wasn't faster, so he gripped his lance tightly and pulled back. Izuku threw with force. The lance was aerodynamic, so it flew dead on. Stain didn't even get a chance to turn around as it struck true, hitting him cleanly in the side. Finally, he had drawn blood. Stain wrenched the lance out of his side, but Izuku was already in his face, delivering a clean punch to his gut. The lance clattered to the ground, and he scooped it back up in time to block another slash with its. You're way more competent than those other fakes, makes me wonder why I've never heard of you. Maybe because I'm not a hero? I'm getting beat by someone who isn't even registered? Izuku smirked, but had to go full defense yet again as Stain let out a flurry of blows. And he just wouldn't stop. He was pissed, and it was clearly visible even through the raggedy mask. Even if he could block most of the slashes, some were getting through, and eventually one of them took a chip off his shoulder. I knew you weren't invincible. I mean, obviously. He was back on defense, but if this continued, he was just going to get worn down. He readied his lance, ignoring the blows to prepare for one final strike. And then Stain's hand was in his face, shoving him backwards, before his legs were swept out from under him by a well-timed slash. The katana was raised high above him, about to stab down through his chest. He knew this one would pierce, and even if he survived in the end, that hero was probably going to die. He was doing well for the most part, but one mistake was enough to end the fight for good. He just wasn't trained enough. Stain's head jerked forwards, and a piece of metal spinning at high speeds flew up, clattering next to him. It was the piece of railing? The two of them looked back to see the hero, still on the ground, but hand raised. He had regained movement. Izuku took the chance to slash at Stain's legs, unable to do a more effective stab from the ground, and rolled away. Stain chose to ignore that, remembering his goal, and charged the hero again. Izuku could see blood dripping from the back of his head as he scrambled to his feet, but the katana was already coming down. The hero brought his hand up again, catching the blade. It dug into flesh, but he got a good grip and activated his quirk. The blade began to spin, wrenching itself out of the hero killer's grasp and flying out of the alley into the street. The hero brought his hand to his chest, trying to staunch the blood flow. Izuku's heels clacked against the concrete as he charged. He watched as Stain looked back at him, expecting to have to dodge another stab. But Izuku thought back to the words of his wise mentor, Cecilia Immergreen. When in doubt, throw hands. Izuku dropped the lance, and crashed his fist into Stain's face, using his momentum to send him flying. He could feel his nose break on impact, and the crash he heard as the hero killer impacted a nearby lamppost didn't sound much better. Stain followed his judgment, picked himself up, picked his sword back up, and got the hell out of there. This kill really wasn't worth the hassle. You got lucky this time, he shouted as he beat a hasty retreat. Izuku didn't take that threat seriously. He needed to deal with the hero first. Rolling him onto his back, he could see the man's injuries weren't bad. The gash in his hand was the worst of it, so he ripped some of the cloth off of his hero costume and wrapped the wound tightly. There were cuts in his chest, but none of them were too deep. I'm slowly gaining feeling back in my arms. The paralysis must wear off after some time. That's good. Izuku hoisted the hero up, draping him over his shoulder. Where do I need to bring you? The hospital is pretty far away. I'll direct you to the base. The base? The man nodded. It's where Muzutafu's underground heroes work out of. At least, on this end of town. Got it. Izuku started slowly dragging the man along, careful to keep him from drooping too much. He was heavy, but not enough to make movement impossible. Dragging that mattress home had trained him for times like this. I should have asked earlier, but what's your name? It would be rude to not be able to thank you for, well, saving my life. I really would have died if you hadn't stepped in. Ah, I'm Cecilia. Izuku decided to just use the name as well, to avoid any risk. I knew you were a foreigner. The accent gave it away, but I didn't want to be rude. Izuku raised an eyebrow at that one. Hey, do I have a weird accent? Cecilia, who had been watching for a while now, responded. You had the same accent as me when you were talking, so I guess your voice mimics the identity you wear? I see. While he was thinking about that, the hero continued. Cammy, I'm so glad you showed up. I thought I was prepared to deal with him, but he's not called the hero killer for nothing. I have a kid, you know. He's applying for UA this year, and I can't imagine missing that. Breaking his heart by dying because I got too confident. Izuku didn't know what to say to that. When I was stuck on the ground, immobile, I almost accepted my death. I really don't know what I was thinking. Heroes have to do everything they can, even if they're cornered. Definitely. Do you know how you got paralyzed? All I could figure out is that I got cut, and then shortly after I couldn't move. It lines up with what other survivors have said. But he was able to hurt me, and never paralyzed me. Which means the activation isn't just being injured. I've got no clue what the specific requirement is, but now we know there's more to it than just a cut. It's not much, but it's good info. I'm glad to be of use. Are you kidding? You saved my life, that's plenty helpful already. Izuku couldn't resist smiling. Thanks. That means a lot. The hero regained use of his legs not long after, and they quickly made their way to the base. Izuku left him in front of the place, not ready to go in. You aren't coming? No. I'm not a registered hero, so I don't want to risk anything. Alright, the man had a look on his face that Izuku couldn't quite place. Just know that you're welcome to come back if you need anything. Just, make sure I'm here to introduce you. I'll consider it. Izuku waved goodbye as the man closed the door behind him, and turned to leave. Out of the corner of his eye, from behind the blinds, he saw two flashes of red, almost like eyes. He didn't like the idea of being watched, but it faded as soon as it started, so he just pushed it to the back of his mind. Time to get home and finally decorate his room some more. The bag was still on the corner he left it, and it looked like no one had touched it. He inspected the inside. Yup, everything was still there and intact. Izuku checked his watch. 2 a.m. He had some time before sunrise, but he had to fix himself up. There were cracks running down his body, and holes where the skin-like material had peeled away to expose the inner mechanisms. Luckily there was no internal damage, so a quick swap to Ollie should fix it. At least the cool night air was nice. Even if he wasn't feeling any pain, it was still soothing to his nerves. The walk was short, he had been close to home when he found the fight already. He mindlessly traced the cracks in his skin. It was weird. He'd felt cracks before, but when they were on his own body, it made Izuku feel more inhuman. He looked at the back of his hand. There was a hole in it, and he could see gears inside, slowly ticking. If he was in a normal body, he'd be seeing muscle fibers, or blood, but now, it was numb, and he didn't even feel disgust looking at what should be a gaping wound. Is there something wrong with me? Likely not. Cecilia was quick to reassure him. I'm the same at times. It gives you a different mentality after a while. Just, be careful not to be reckless because of it. Right. I'll take care of myself. Maybe we should go eat something. How about Culver's? That was Narissa. I'm sure we don't have one of those in Japan. But I did promise we would go if we ever saw one. Next time. Finally, the apartment came into sight. He was surprised that it had never been cleaned up, but it did look clean enough on the outside. Not wasting any time, Izuku rushed back to the room to rest. He set the bag down on the table. His room was a lot more homey now. It had a desk, a lamp, some wall decoration, an actual bed with nicer sheets, overall a lot better than how he found it. Still no electronics, though. His phone had died a while back, and with no way to charge it, he'd been off the grid for almost a month now. Well, time to heal up. I haven't had damage like this before, but it can't be worse than when I got stabbed, right? It was worse. As soon as he turned into Ollie's identity, he felt sharp pains all over. Turns out having literal cracks in your skin hurt, and while being a zombie dulled the pain, unlike Cecilia's identity he still felt it. He bit down on his own arm as the pain slowly faded, cracks slowly closing up. Yeah, it hurt, but only for a little. And it was better to just deal with it now than let the cracks grow any further. Even while walking home, each step had widened them ever so slightly. So once I break, it's easy to make my wounds worse, but it takes a lot to actually crack me. Noted. Okay. Now that you're all healed up, you better hurry up and come into the dreamscape. But what about decorating? Later. Ollie, please, my ears. I'll be right there, so stop screaming. Izuku got up from the table, changing back into Cecilia's identity. He had no clue what Ollie needed him for, but he figured it would be fun. Good night. He woke up in the dreamscape with the Tanuki statue in his hand. He had almost forgotten about it, considering the distraction that was Stain, but he should have guessed something was up about it. Well, maybe not, it wasn't that notable. Is this another Cecilia situation where I have to find the figure this belongs to? He wondered aloud. Ollie was there waiting for him. Not this time. In fact, a hand reached over Izuku's shoulder and grabbed the statue right out of his hands. I'll be taking that. Who? Izuku turned around to face the new voice, and found a pretty normal-looking guy, all things considered. He didn't have any defining animalistic or otherwise unique features like the others, just dressed in a black jacket and pants with yellow accents all over. What made him stand out was his quite piercing yellow eyes and talisman-looking earrings. Yatagami Fuma. I'm a fixer. Pleasure to do business with you. A fixer? What kind of things are you fixing? We do odd jobs, just whatever people pay me for. Izuku nodded contemplatively. So you're an all-rounder, that's good. I prefer jack of all trades, but yes, exactly. Glad we're on the same page here. He could see a modest building behind the new guy. Looked a bit run down, but they could fix it up with time. And is this your office? It's odd that all the guys we've gotten so far have offices. Well, two's just a coincidence, so we'll see if the pattern continues. Want to see inside? I'll tell you more about myself once we get comfortable. Fuma turned and beckoned for him to come inside, before walking ahead. Izuku followed closely behind. Ollie came along too. They sat down at the front desk, Fuma at his chair and the two of them in seats opposite. Somehow, Izuku felt he was about to be asked to pay for his services. To be blunt, I'm a spirit, specifically a raccoon yukai. He clasped his hands under his chin. What that means for you is I can give you the ability to turn into objects as a disguise. Ooh! Izuku and Ollie both exclaimed. That's really useful. I'm glad you think so. Then I hope we will have a fruitful partnership. Pleasure doing business with you. The two of them shook hands. Izuku wondered if he had just agreed to something he shouldn't have. He'd think about that later. After all, Ollie was about to. Okay Izuku. Now that you two got introduced, let's go. I have something cool to show you. Alright, let's go. Izuku was practically dragged out of the place by Ollie, with Fuma following close behind. Clearly things had been happening while he was busy fighting, and he had no clue what could be getting Ollie this. Well, she's always like this. But still, he had no clue what was about to happen. Okay, maybe Ollie was hyping it up a bit much, but Nerissa had figured out how to change clothes. That might sound a bit strange, but there were no closets or spare clothes in the dreamscape, so what she really figured out how to do was manifest new clothes. She was already chattering away to Mint, Jurard, and Cecilia as the three approached. I was just thinking that I wanted a new outfit, and suddenly poof. Nerissa made a motion with her hands. Then I was wearing this. I think it suits you. Nerissa turned to face them, smiling from ear to ear. Thank you darling. I was hoping you'd like it. Ollie was drooling, eyes fixated on Nerissa's chest. Izuku pretended not to notice. Izuku focused on himself. He wanted to see if he could pull that off too, and after a bit of visualizing, his clothes actually changed. Now he was wearing a shirt that said jacket and a pair of sweatpants. Nerissa gave him a disappointed look before placing a hand on his shoulder. Izuku, once we get out of the situation, we're fixing your fashion sense. The others nodded along. Alright, I'll work on that. Before he had any time to continue conversing, Ollie was dragging him off again, this time to the lounge. It was time for language lessons again. They were tough, but it was fun. A different kind of fun than normal training. Learning their languages was like getting to know them better, and he was happy to have friends who were willing to share these things with him. He wanted to be closer to them, in a way he hadn't felt since Kaken. They really did share a special bond. He was so happy to keep unlocking more of them and becoming closer. He felt a tear drip down his cheek as he held Ollie's hand. He was gonna cry, wasn't he? Omake 6, Izuku. Cecilia? Help me. The two of them stared at Nerissa in disbelief. While Izuku and her were sparring, she had tripped on a piece of misplaced paper and slammed her head into the wall. And her horn, well, she was stuck. Cecilia grabbed her legs and lifted her off the ground, trying to align her to pull her out. Izuku, can you grab her waist and lift as well? Maybe you should do that one. Darling, I'd be happy if you grabbed my waist. Izuku shot a look at Cecilia, who shrugged, trying to hide her smirk. He groaned. I'm getting too used to you weirdos. Izuku muttered to himself, lifting Nerissa until she was perpendicular to the wall. After that, and a bit of pulling, they were able to get her out. But now there was a horn-shaped hole in the side of the lounge. I hope that will fix itself. Cecilia chimed in. Those dents from when you jumped off the balcony are still there, so I don't think this is going away. Ugh. We should be more careful, then. It would SCK if there was broken stuff everywhere. 1451, 1452, 1453, Izuku dropped another coin into the growing pile, and formed another in his hand. One side had a picture of his face, and the other had a neat-looking logo Jurard had drawn out for him, saying it was his group's. 1457, 1458, 1459. You're getting close to 1500. Jurard exclaimed, I'm surprised you're able to hold on to that many. Izuku stopped counting, picking up a coin from inside the pile and holding it up. I'm only able to keep holding on to them because I'm counting. Look, they're losing their detail. The two leaned in to look at the coin, and confirmed Izuku's statement. The face on the front looked more like a doodle, and the symbol on the back was heavily simplified. I guess it's getting drawn simpler to save on rendering. I wish. I'm just forgetting, that's all. Speaking of which, what number was I on? A few coins vanished, and the pile got noticeably smaller. Izuku groaned. Alright, I'm tired of this. I want to move on to something more interesting. You're telling me. At least you get something to do, I just have to watch. Jurard flopped over on his back, and Izuku followed. You don't have to watch me, you know. Yeah, but Fuma told me someone needed to supervise you so you wouldn't go do something else. Why don't you go ask someone else to watch, then? I'm gonna practice in a different way now, so your shift is over. Jurard looked contemplative for a moment, before shooting up. Good idea. See ya, I'm gonna fetch Mint. I see her over there now. I'll just come with you, then. Getting off the ground, he followed close behind. For the past hours and hours he had been practicing manifesting objects. Honestly, he should have tried it earlier, since this is his dreamscape. Emphasis on dream. So it would make sense that if he could imagine something, he could put it in this reality. But there were limits, and that's what he'd been up to for these hours. Turns out, small objects are easy, big objects are hard, and the more detailed an object is, the harder it is for him to mentally hold on to it. And if he loses grip on an object, it poofs away like it was never there. Simply put, he was limited by his brain power. Mint! Jurard shouted, and the maid's head snapped up. Watch Izuku for me, Kay? And he promptly walked off, leaving the two of them to spend some time together. They entered the cafe and sat down at one of the booths. So, Mint took a sip of the tea she had been brewing. Have you tried making anything edible yet? Considering that objects lose their detail when I lose focus? I don't want anything I manifested inside me. Izuku shivered at the thought. Something about it just felt off. That's reasonable. Mint refilled her teacup, and filled one for Izuku as well. So what do you want to practice? I just needed an excuse to stop making coins. It was so boring? Repetitive? Mind-melting? Exactly. Then I've got something you can practice. Go wake up and we can try extending the time you can last being incorporeal. Izuku perked up at that. You think it's doable? We'll find out. Now then, Mint leaned forwards, hand out in front of Izuku's face, before flicking him in the forehead. Somehow, by some miracle, that made him instantly wake up. It was a bit disorienting, and he fell on his face when he tried to get up. PFFF, don't get up too fast, my friend. Hi Fuma. Is Mint there with you? Here. Her voice rang out from inside his skull. Nice to see you, even though it's been 15 seconds. Ah, did you miss me? Izuku giggled to himself. Yeah, I missed you so badly I can't believe you'd leave me alone for more than 5 seconds. Betrayal. Heh, alright, let's get on with it. Try just staying for as long as possible. You might want a trash can on hand. Izuku dug around in his cabinets, pulling out a couple trash bags, just in case he got too nauseous. There wasn't any stalling anymore. He'd been avoiding this since the escape, since he really didn't want a repeat of how he felt that night, but now that he was more stable, maybe things would go well? He needed a new set of trash bags. On the plus side, he did get his time being incorporeal up a few seconds, but he felt bad. Real bad. He was laying on the windowsill, getting as much of the cool night air as he could. Progress is progress, ugh. Sorry. I thought it might go better than that. Mint was probably feeling guilty for making him sick again. Izuku was glad she cared that much. Fuma sighed. It was funny at first, but now I just feel bad. Should I be happy my misery wasn't funny enough? Mint decided it was time to exit the conversation. I'll leave you two to figure that out. I want to hang out with the others. Aw man. See you later, then. Izuku took a swig from his water bottle. He'd have to go fill it up again soon, and the cool air was nice tonight? Let's head out and go do something. What are you thinking of doing? I dunno. Refill on some stuff, wander around, find some more decorations. We'll figure it out. Fuma quieted down for a bit, and Izuku headed out of the apartments. There was a convenience store nearby, and he'd been able to find money for some assorted goods laying around on the street. You can't find everything you need by just scavenging, after all. He could hear a car alarm blaring as he approached. Something must be going on. That shopkeeper guy hates loud noises. You must be pretty familiar with this place if you know that. Yeah, the guy has a hearing quirk. Makes everything loud. I set him off the first time I went. He morphed, taking on Cecilia's identity once again as he got closer to the building. The glass doors were shattered, metal strewn across the entrance. Izuku stopped across the street, crouching down and peering inside. 2 guys inside. One of them's big, with a physical enhancer quirk. Got weird markings on his skin. The other one's smaller, but he's got a gun. No idea how he got a license for that. Looks like they crashed into the storefront to block the entrance. Is that going to be a problem for you? No. Transforming into Mint for a brief moment, he walked through the glass walls. Not at the entrance, but to the left, near the back corner. Back in Cecilia's identity, he moved over an aisle, careful to quiet his steps. The robbers were pretty loud, though, so it was no problem. The one with the gun was grabbing as much as he could off the shelves, dumping it into a duffel bag. Maybe they ran out of money at the counter? He changed his grip on the lance, peering through the cracks of the shelf. The man's eyes flicked up from the bag and met his. Wadash. Izuku stabbed through the shelf, into the gunman's chest. It wasn't fatal, but enough for him to drop the gun. He apologized in his head to the poor shopkeeper, and pulled the lance back, kicking the shelf over on top of the guy. One down. What the, who's there? The other guy turned to face the commotion, and the old man ducked under the counter, finally catching a break. He looked up to see Izuku crouched on top of the closer shelf. You little sheet, take this. The stronger guy swung at the shelf underneath him, his tattoo marking things glowing bright red. Izuku jumped, obviously, and landed on top of the guy's head, stepping behind him and stabbing him with the lance as well. He didn't go down as easily, though, but he was slow on the uptake. Instead of pulling out the lance, he shoved, pushing him into the broken glass from the shelf. He jumped on top of his head again, holding it down for good measure. The smaller guy fumbled around with his right hand, clutching his wound with his left. Grabbing the gun, he squeezed the trigger as many times as he could, but only one bullet came out, hitting Izuku square in the shoulder. Not that he felt it. He slammed down on the shelf above the smaller guy again, and a bit of blood spurted out of the wound. He grabbed the gun from his hand as well. There were still a few bullets left, the guy just forgot to PP the gun. Must be new to this sort of thing. Turning back to the big guy, he took his lance back, and shot him once in his right thigh, to keep him from standing up again, before walking to the store counter. You alright down there? Izuku peered over the counter to see the old man cowering in fear. I took care of them, you can come out now. Oh, my old bones can't take this kind of stress, the man reached up, dragging himself up from the ground. He took Izuku's hand to help himself stabilize. He looked at the disaster, and his face got paler. Ah, sorry for the mess? I can help you clean up if you need me. It's quite alright, Missy. I'm just glad to be alive. If you say so. He looked at the pistol in his hand, taking the magazine out of the bottom. He dumped the bullets on the floor, and placed the disarmed weapon on the counter. That should make this place a little safer. Luckily, I don't have fingerprints, so this can't be traced back to me. The shopkeeper looked worried about that. Are you going to leave before the police arrive? I can hear the sirens approaching. You can? Izuku couldn't hear anything. Must be a few minutes out, then. He took a glance at the robbers. The little one was still stuck under the weight of the metal shelf, and the big one was trying, and failing, to stand. He turned back. Look, I'm not interested in getting arrested for vigilantism, so I've gotta go before anyone sees me. Missy, the shop has cameras. The two looked up at the camera in the corner, trained right at the counter. The red dot was on, shining bright. Well, Izuku grimaced. At least they don't sell the ones with audio to regular shops. I'll settle for that. He slicked back his hair as he left the counter, cataloging the damages. It was a lot, but the police gave money in cases like this. He just hoped his involvement didn't complicate things too much. He picked up the goods he was here for, and gave the shopkeeper the money he needed. Here's a little extra for the trouble. Stay safe. Thank you, Missy. I'll try. He climbed over the car as he left through the wrecked entrance. The doorbell chimed. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance. Izuku stuck to the shadows. My dear friend, have you considered vigilantism as a possible path forward? Izuku stayed silent for a bit, contemplating. Yeah, it was fun to beat up the bad guys, but he didn't want to become some lunatic like Stain. It would be no good if he went imposing his beliefs onto random villains. But on the other hand, I need more practical experience fighting if I want to be a hero. So if I run into a villain, I won't hesitate. Asahi Rokuro, 25-year-old male, unemployed. History of domestic abuse and alcoholism. Found in an alleyway with a deep puncture wound in the upper left chest area, and 2 broken ribs. Taken into custody. Koichi Ryuchi, 20-year-old male, IT intern. Bought illegal drags from an unknown source. Found. With stab wounds in both palms, and a mild concussion. The drags were untouched. Medicated, and put in rehab. Soma Ko, Sakurako Shinobu, and Noriaki Takudo, 24-year-old male, 23-year-old female, 30-year-old male, all office workers. Attacked another man for having a mutation-type quirk. Found with 2 bullet holes in each around the stomach area, and the 24-year-old had both legs broken in multiple places. All taken into custody. Satoshi Takuya and Fuku Tomoko, 27-year-old male, 26-year-old female, both gang members. Attempted kidnapping of a young girl. Found outside a police station, the former had large gashes in his arms and a severe head injury, the latter had glass shards in her back and 7 fractured ribs. Hospitalized, and later taken into custody. Hideo Sho, 43-year-old male, teacher. In possession of recordings of multiple children from his class. Found with a broken arm, eye cut out, and both hands cut off. Hospitalized, and later taken into custody. Ayaka Haruko, 18-year-old female, student at a local college. On the run after strangling roommate to death. Found with a punctured lung and 3 broken ribs. Hospitalized, and diagnosed with brain damage due to asphyxiation, before being taken into custody. Akihiko Shin, 22-year-old male, villain. Connected to a string of murders of quirkless people. Found with spinal cord damage in the lower back area, damage to the skull, and a broken arm. Permanently crippled from the waist down. Is there a reason you're telling me this? You've been busy. The man stepped out of the shadow of the tree. He was wearing all black, with a strangely long scarf around his neck. Izuku could see it twitching slightly. The man's eyes flashed red for a moment, before fading back into the darkness, but nothing seemed to happen. That didn't mean that nothing actually happened, though. He'd have to be on guard. So I have. If you knew all of those were me, why are you only approaching me now? We never got to the scene in time. We only knew they were you because the wounds matched. Izuku should have seen that coming. The man probably only knew what he looked like because of that camera footage, too. He'd been too sloppy. What do you want from me then? I wanted to get a read on your abilities, Cecilia, but it doesn't seem like I can do anything against them. How do you know my name? Who are you? Guy at the corner store told us after we took him in for questioning, Izuku sighed. That SCKED, but there wasn't anything he could do about it. You aren't in any police database, so it must be an alias, along with your appearance. As for who I am, my name is Eraserhead. You're just going to tell me that? Now I've got a pretty good idea of what you do, even if I don't recognize the name. It's just common courtesy. I can tell I'm not in danger. Do you think I'm weak? Izuku glanced down at the man on the ground. He was standing between the hero and his current opponent. Now that he wasn't in active combat anymore, he could tell he went a bit too far. No, I can tell you're strong. But you have restraint. Most vigilantes I have to deal with tend to kill their victims. You only wound them in ways they'll live from, even if you could easily dispose of them. Even the one with the punctured lung was done in a way that they could live long enough to be rushed to the hospital. Right, yeah. He didn't kill, and so the hero had enough faith that he would be reasonable that they didn't have to start brawling. He didn't like how spot on the guy was, though. Heroes don't kill unless necessary. None of those people needed to die, so I let them live. You think you're a hero? I'll be one eventually. Right? Well, I won't beat around the bush anymore. I need you to answer some questions. If you cooperate, you might get to leave without HNDCFFS. Izuku grimaced. No matter what he said, things weren't going to end well. It all hinged on what Eraserhead wanted to know. Narissa chimed in from inside his head. Be as honest as you can without giving away anything too big. It's easier to get away with lies if you pad them with truths. Time to get serious. Do you have a reason you went after the targets you did? I just stumbled into them, I wasn't actively looking for trouble. Truth. There's a lot of crime around this area, but I have better things to do than go out hunting random villains. What better things? Training. The hero looked a little more relieved after hearing that. It's not like Izuku wanted to run into so many bad guys, but this area was pretty run down, so they tended to pop up. All he did was put them out of commission and leave before the heroes, or police, showed up to take them away. Next question. Do you have any formal training, and if so, who trained you? You're quite proficient with your weapon, so I have to assume you received training from someone. That's 2 questions. Does it matter? Eraserhead ped his head to the side. Izuku was going to answer all his questions anyway, so it really didn't matter. That depends on what you call formal training. But no matter the answer, I can't tell you who trained me. You wouldn't be able to talk to them, anyways. Are they dead? No, I'm just the only one able to speak to them. The hero took some time to digest that. Izuku was willing to wait, and he could see the man mulling over the statement, trying to decide if it was worth pursuing this line of questioning. So you have semi-formal training from someone I can't talk to? Izuku nodded. Right. Got it. You said you wanted to be a hero eventually. Why? It was his turn to think about that for a moment. Should he lie to try and seem more noble, or just tell the truth? Well, his real reason wasn't that bad to begin with. To save people with a smile. He tried to crack a smile, but it was clearly forced. You don't look too happy right now. Yeah, Izuku glanced down. I'm not doing too great right now. It's hard to keep a smile on your face when you're broken homeless. He could hear Eraserhead SCK in a breath. Maybe that wasn't the best thing to say, but he couldn't stop himself from saying it. He was just glad to have someone to talk to. Even if the hero wasn't here to make friends with Izuku. How long have you been on the streets for? Close to 3 months. But I've been getting by. You don't need to worry about me. Izuku's calm facade was cracking. He didn't know how much more pressure he could take, and he was slipping up as a result. The hero got closer. Cecilia, was it? Your quirk isn't affected by mine, which I assume is because it's a mutation type. He wasn't entirely wrong. I can tell that you've got some sort of doll quirk. Is that how you've managed to survive for that long? Considering you're unemployed, since we couldn't find a trace of you in the databases. That's right. He was scarily good at reading Izuku. How much was he giving away? I don't have to eat nearly as much, and I'm a lot more durable. Helps me last longer between meals and such. And do you grow at all? I'd assume not, if your body isn't made of flesh and bones. Izuku winced. Correct as well? This is how I've always looked. Not entirely the truth, but it was accurate to how the identities worked. He laughed, but it was hollow. You're scaring me a bit with these questions. Don't be. I'm just looking out for everyone's safety. The sooner I figure out your deal, the sooner we can get you on the right track. Right? So, to summarize, you have dreams of being a hero, you've got a quirk that hides your real identity without being affected by mine, you have basically no formal training, and you've gone completely under the radar. Izuku didn't like where this was going. In addition, the way you act reminds me of people I've trained. Tell me, how old are you? Izuku winced. It was pretty obvious, but he was in a bad position. If the hero found out he was a minor, there was a decent chance he would just get taken back to mom, and that would end in disaster. It was either he lie and try to get a better position, or, judging by your reaction, my hunch must be right. But I need confirmation. Lying was out the window. If he said a fake age now, it wouldn't get him anywhere. There was something else he could try, though. 15. He could see the hero's eyes darken, and his mouth set into a straight line. Was he disappointed? Sad? Angry? Izuku couldn't tell, it was way too dark out, but regardless, Eraserhead opened his mouth once again. You really shouldn't dash. I have more to say, though. Izuku could tell that the expression he made was surprised this time. By all means, go ahead. He had the floor now, and he needed to convince the hero to take his side. I need you to promise me you won't try to take me back to my home. I am not safe there, they're looking for me, and even if they don't know what I look like right now, I'm not confident they can't figure it out. Izuku's breath was quickening as he spoke, speeding through his words as he tried to get everything out before the hero could argue back. I wasn't planning on that, so you don't have to worry. Izuku paused his rambling, out of breath, before visibly deflating with a sigh of relief. I got all scared over nothing, huh? Kid, you've been homeless for 3 months. Obviously your situation at home isn't good, so why would I try and take you back? You'd be surprised. Japan's child protection system wasn't the greatest, and they both knew it. Let me make this clear, kid. I came here to figure out what your deal was. My priority was both to keep you from hurting any more people, and to help put you on the right track. You're clearly someone who can be reasoned with. Eraserhead took a breath, and stared Izuku right in the face. I want to help you. That's what a hero does. Something wet dripped down his cheek. Why? Why was he crying now? This was a good thing, so why? Do you really mean that? You really care? It's my job to care, kid. I take these things seriously. He couldn't hold back his tears any longer. He clenched his fists, bringing them up to his eyes to wipe them dry. His sleeves were getting soaked, but he didn't care. All that mattered now was, this was a step forward. He didn't know how big it would be, but it was something. Eraserhead came up to him, and held his hands. Come with me. I'll bring you back to my home, but I need you to tell me as much as you can about you and your situation. The more I know, the more I can help you. Oh okay. I can do that. The hero patted him on the back. It was now that the villain on the ground made himself known again. That was a very sweet moment, but my legs are broken and I'm about to pass out. He then promptly passed out. Eraserhead winced, and pulled out his phone. Time to call in a favor. He had a kid to help. Izuku leaned against the car window, and it bumped against him as they drove. He felt a lot calmer now, even if he was putting his trust in a guy he met 10 minutes ago. If only it was quiet in his head. The others were having a rather heated discussion on whether trusting Eraserhead was the right play. Fuma was the most vocal doubter, followed by Jurud, but it made sense given their professions. On the other side of the argument was Narissa and Mint, who both saw the hero in a better light, and had a lot more faith in the hero system as a whole. Ollie and Cecilia were too busy instigating to actually argue on behalf of either side, which wasn't helping his focus. Personally, he was willing to trust Eraserhead. Not that he wasn't concerned, but in the moment, he just knew something was different about the guy. Something that made him more trustworthy than pretty much every other authority figure in his life. And so here he was, sitting in his passenger seat as they drove across town. Waiting for Eraserhead to break the silence. Are you willing to talk about yourself now? Not yet. I want to be in a place where I'm sure no one will overhear. Do you really think whoever is coming after you can hear you now? Izuku looked down and sighed. I really don't know anymore. The fact he knew what he did back then, how did he even know that? The hero got the idea. They stopped at a red light, and Izuku felt a weight on his shoulders. Some sort of gray scarf? It was weirdly heavy and it was the thing that he had been wearing around his neck when they met. Take it. It's like a weighted blanket, it'll make you feel better. Why do you trust me so much? I haven't done anything to earn it. Eraserhead thought for a moment, and the light turned green. Because you remind me of my students. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you're fidgeting right now. Izuku suddenly realized he was messing with the scarf, and put his hands back in his lap. I don't know how you grew up, or what brought you to this point. But even if you had to mature, or grow up fast, you're still a kid, no matter how you might feel. And I can't leave someone like you to suffer on your own. I see. He buried his face in the scarf. It would be embarrassing to cry 2 times in a row? 10 minutes later, the car doors clicked shut in front of a small house near the center of Mutation. The hero had been on the phone for most of that time, talking to someone. Their voice was loud enough that Izuku could make out some of the words, but it seemed like the two were preparing the house for him to stay over. He waited at the door as Eraserhead fumbled with his keys, before a man with bright yellow hair opened the door for them. Izuku could have sworn he'd seen him before, but he couldn't place where. Welcome home. And hello little listener. I hope Shoyuta didn't give you too much trouble. He recognized that voice. Interesting. Izuku was doing his best to not react here, since it was still the dead of night, but he could tell by the other two's faces that he was totally giving his reaction away. He needed to work on his poker face. I need to get some sleep before today gets any weirder. Present Mike cracked up at that one, and quickly hurried the two inside. Eraserhead walked off to what Izuku assumed was the kitchen, probably to make some coffee. He seemed like that type. The guest room is right over. Present Mike pointed to a door directly up the stairs. There. It's late, so get yourself cleaned up and rest up. You don't want to get any info out of me? Look at yourself, little listener. You're practically falling asleep standing. He poked Izuku's cheek. We can talk business once you're rested. Take care of yourself, okay? He could feel the exhaustion hit him all at once. Yeah, okay. I'll do that. Mike ruffled his hair, and left him to his own devices. The place felt warm, and as he walked up the carpeted stairs he noted the picture frames lining the walls. Everyone pictured was so happy, all 4 of them. Nothing like his family. They seemed like good people. The others had long since stopped bickering, mainly because Cecilia got bored of poking at them. Of everyone, it was Fuma who voiced his agreement. Seems that you made the right choice after all, my friend. I'll admit my defeat. We still have to wait and see how they'll react, but I'll think about that tomorrow. We'll see you in the dreamscape, then? Obviously. Give me some time to get myself together. After a quick shower, warm water, Izuku opened the door to his new room. He didn't know how long he'd stick around, but what he did know is that he finally, after months of sleeping on a barely put-together futon, had a bed. It was springy, with soft covers and pillows, really a dream come true. It might even be better than the one at his old home. It was so good that he basically fell asleep as soon as he hit the bed. He had just enough time to get under the covers before he drifted off. Maybe he wouldn't have to train with the others today. An off day sounded just right. Omake 7, contemplating the situation. Hisashi watched from the foot of the stairs as Izuku vanished into the bathroom, and as Shoyuta sipped his coffee at the dining room table, looking like he was already regretting his decision. That was just like him, though. He had been surprised to get the call telling him they'd be having a guest, and that it was the vigilante that he had left home to go track down hours prior. But, seeing that she was a kid, it wasn't surprising at all. Hindsight is 20, still, he had to wonder what kind of situation Cecilia was in to have to crash with them over going back to their home. He'd likely find out whenever she woke up, but it was still something worth mulling over. It's best to approach things like this carefully, or the problem would just grow. He could faintly hear the water start to run upstairs. He had to wonder, if her body was like a doll, and probably artificial, would it be dangerous if water got in her joints? He'd broken a computer by spilling his drink on it, so it wasn't out of the question. Well, he had faith that the little listener would know more than he did, so he stopped worrying about it. He would go back to bed, but the sun was about to rise. Was he going to have to wake up tomorrow night as well? Katsuki clicked his pen as he stared at the sheet of paper on his desk. They were really asking him what he wanted to do in the future? It was so obvious he didn't even need to think, but he hadn't written a word. His eyes kept drifting up to the desk in front of him. It had been empty for a couple weeks, before they put someone from another class in it. Someone to replace him. Deku and Itsuki both had vanished into thin air. The old hag didn't even have a clue where they could have gone, and there wasn't any warning. What was the nerd even thinking, disappearing on him? He wouldn't even pick up his phone. Not one of his calls ever got through to any of the Midoriyas, but he wasn't expecting a response from Itsuki, and if Inko wasn't taking calls from her best friend of 20 years, there was no chance he'd get a response. So he stared at the page in front of him once again. There would be no Deku to witness his rise to greatness, to admit defeat as he claimed the title of the #1 hero. How could he make him finally look up at him instead of down when he wasn't even here anymore? It just wasn't fair. But he had to write something. Click, click, click. He kept to himself now. There wasn't any good reason to go around bothering people now. His lackeys stuck around, and he still had friends, but the edge was gone. It wasn't that he didn't have anyone to lash out at anymore, it was more like the wind had been taken out of his sails. See you tomorrow, Bakugo. Yeah, see ya. He waved goodbye at the intersection, and kept on walking back home. He barely registered the cars flying by. He just clicked the door shut behind him when he got home, and took off his shoes. Same as always. The old hag was waiting for him. How was school? Fine. Everyone was tired. More, muted. Things got a lot quieter around the house after they vanished. The old mom was shocked that Auntie wouldn't respond to her at all. It really hurt her, he could tell. You always say it's fine. Did anything even happen? They asked me what I wanted to do in the future. Right, and I assume you put dash. Hero, yeah. I did. Katsuki scoffed, before taking off his backpack and starting to rummage through it. Let me find it. Huh? He pulled out a phone from his bag. Oh sheet, this is the Wing Kid's. He gave it to me earlier and never asked for it back. Well, you better go give it back. You know where he lives, right? Yeah. Just, he turned the phone on. It had a default background, looked pretty plain. No passcode either. He navigated to the phone app, typed in Deku's number, and pressed call. You've gotta be kidding me, brat. You don't seriously think that'll work? It went to voicemail. Let me try, at least. He typed in Itsuki's number. It rang once, twice, thr. Hello? ... The two stared at the phone in shock. Suddenly, he was at a loss for words. What could he even say? Well, there was one thing. Where the hell have you been? He could hear Itsuki fumbling with the phone, and panicked breathing. Don't you dare hang up on me, not until I have answers. I can't tell you that. Then where the hell is Deku? You must know that much. You do know where he is, right? Or can you not tell me that either? He heard a click from the other end of the line, and then there was silence. He have hung up on me? That little sheet, when I get my hands on him. Mom looked mad too. But more than that, she looked confused. Katsuki hadn't always been the best at picking up on stuff, but she was surprisingly perceptive. Do they not have Izuku? Huh? She pointed at the phone. He hung up when you pressed him on it. But he said he couldn't tell you when you asked about his own location. What the hell? Izuku vanished and Auntie and Itsuki, but not together? Why? Neither of them had an answer to that. It just gave them more questions. Ones that he might not ever get an answer for. He just had to keep looking forwards, towards that #1 spot. And then he could find Izuku. He had to. Beep. 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 Ugh, what is that sound? Izuku, darling, don't tell me you forgot what an alarm sounds like. Nerissa sounded disappointed in him already. Not a great start to the day. Beep. 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 It turned off with a click as his hand found the right button. He slowly lifted himself out of bed, turning to face the clock. 7 a.m.? Nerissa, when did I go to bed? If I recall, it was 5 a.m. But we were talking in the dreamscape for a while, so I slept more than 24 hours. Nerissa giggled. Benefits of a good, soft bed. I can't believe we spent that long arguing. That was so pointless. To recap, they had spent a long time in the lounge debating whether or not to tell the two heroes. There were so many things they didn't know about the two, but at the end of the day, after a long while of back and forths, it was decided that Izuku would tell them. There was no telling when another chance like this would come by, so they had to take advantage of it. He turned towards the door, and took a deep breath. He had probably kept them waiting long enough, if he had slept a whole 24 hours. Maybe this would fix his body clock? Probably not. He opened the door. There was a man with yellow hair looking back at him from the other side. He shut the door. Good morning, little listener. Came muffled from the other side of the door. I was coming to check on you, but it seems you're finally up. Why yeah, I'm up. Sorry to keep you waiting. Don't sweat it. I'm glad you were able to rest up that much. We could tell you needed it. Izuku banged his head against the door. They were way too nice. This was weird, but he wanted to trust them. Is Eraserhead awake too? He's been awake for a couple hours. He tends to just take naps throughout the day instead of actually sleeping. Izuku could relate to that. Sometimes sleep just never comes, and you gotta nap to extract as much sleep as you can. Can you let him know that? I'll tell you guys everything I can. I just need some time to prepare myself. There was a beat of silence. Of course, little listener. We'll wait for you downstairs. He could hear Mick's footsteps fade as they got further away, and he sighed. Time to make sure everything was in order. He hadn't detransformed in so long that he didn't even know the state of his clothes. He turned back, and was happy to find his uniform in decent condition. It was a little beat up from Dad, but he hadn't worn it on the streets, because he went from Mint's identity straight into Cecilia's, and never went back. The hem was a little singed, though. Opening the door for real this time and stepping out, he didn't see either of them. But they were probably around the corner downstairs. Every step down those stairs was nerve-wracking. His heart felt like it was beating out of his chest. His shoes touched the hardwood floor at the bottom of the stairs. He was still wearing those bright red shoes he always had. Now that he thought about it, they really didn't go well with the rest of his outfit. But he had to stay focused on what mattered right now. He could hear the two heroes chatting away the room over. He stepped into the room. He could see Eraserhead do a double take, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. It's nice to actually meet you too. My name is Izuku Midoriya. He bowed almost 90 degrees. I hope you'll give me the time to explain what's going on. I would comment on you switching genders, but where did your accent go? The two of them seemed equally surprised, but Mike was the first to ask a question. I really thought you were a foreigner. I get that a surprising amount. Izuku took the open seat at the table. It has to do with my weird quirk, so I think I should explain it first. The floor is yours, kid. Eraserhead leaned forwards, hands crossed. Right. The easiest way to explain it is, I can transform into people, but not people in real life. He tapped his head. I have a bunch of people in my brain that I can transform into. Not ones that I made up, though. They've always been there. You've only really seen one of them, but right now I have 6. Right now? They tend to just show up sometimes. And they also talk to me, can't forget that. If they haven't shown up yet, they look like blurry gray figures. He looked over at the two of them, seeing how they processed the information. He wasn't sure how to also explain the dreamscape, so he was going to wait until they finished digesting this part. This sounds pretty complicated, little listener. I'm having a bit of trouble following, but I think I get the gist. Eraserhead seems to have a more solid grasp of Izuku's explanation, judging by how he didn't look confused at all. More than that, he looked surprised, but why wouldn't he? His quirk was pretty baffling when explained. It didn't really follow the trends of what quirks were supposed to be. As long as you understand some of it, that's good enough for me. There's one more part, where when I fall asleep I can go into a space we call the dreamscape, because it's all in my head, and I can talk with everyone else more freely there. It's really just a lucid dream, but I only started to be able to stay in it regularly once my quirk started. How do I explain this? Did something happen to your quirk? Eraserhead inquired. No, well, yes. I've always had my quirk, in hindsight, since I always had the dream, but I wasn't able to use it until recently, when Nerissa showed up. She was the first. Until then, about 3 months ago, I was under the impression I was quirkless, so it was a shock. Mike opened his mouth, about to say something, before closing it and thinking for a moment. I would ask why, if you had a quirk, you thought you were quirkless, but it was likely a false negative. Technology has improved a lot in a decade, so you got unlucky, little listener. Neither of them looked happy. Izuku was surprised to find their looks full of pity instead of the usual disgust or apathy. Things were rough for me. But I need to tell you about how I got into my situation now. Go on, kid. No matter what it is, we'll listen. Thank you, I'll try my best to keep this short. It started with my dad, who left my life after the diagnosis. But he only stayed in touch with my mom and brother, but refused to contact me. I was only able to learn what he was like from listening in on conversations over the phone, and, judging from what I know now and what I learned then, he's a very dangerous villain. The two heroes, who were passively listening before, sat up straight, more focused than before. Eraserhead was the first to speak. So this isn't just a case of being kicked out or abandoned. Your life is in actual danger? Yes, very much so. All I knew about him before we met was that he was interested in quirks, and the people he expressed interest in would vanish without a trace. And if they ever came back, their quirk was gone. It really freaked me out, but I was still skeptical until he sent someone to my house to bring me to him. And this is the part where things get really scary, and the reason I don't feel completely safe even now. Izuku gripped his shirt tightly. He was scared to keep going, what ifs flooding his mind. But Mike laid his hand on his shoulder to comfort him. "We'll keep you safe, little listener, I promise." Let's hope so. He has a scary amount of power? He knew that I had been training at the beach, despite no one really seeing me there apart from one old man. The doctor I visited regularly worked for him, and Izuku took a deep breath. When we spoke, he offered to give me a quirk. Huh? For real? The two heroes spoke simultaneously, their words overlapping but the surprise coming through clearly. Yeah. And if people are coming back from being taken by him without their quirk? Then I don't think he was bluffing. I really think he was about to offer to actually give me a quirk, and that's what scares me the most. I denied him, because his condition was becoming a villain and I already had my quirk, and then he tried to kill me, but I was able to get away and now we're here. But someone who can give and take quirks, and who clearly has a lot of influence. I see. Eraserhead looked deathly serious. This is why you couldn't risk anything. If he ever found me again, then I probably wouldn't get another chance to run. I only got away because I got extremely lucky and had the element of surprise. That won't happen again. The mood hadn't been bright to begin with, but everyone was gloomier than when they came in. Eraserhead got up from the table and started pacing. Mike tapped his pen against the table. Izuku just sat there, waiting. If what you're saying is really the truth, then I need to escalate this. You two should get yourselves something to eat. I'm calling Nedzu. What about you, Shoyuta? I ate earlier. Don't worry about me. Mike looked like he was contemplating arguing, but he swallowed his rebuttal and opened the fridge. I'll make us something quick, little listener. You just sit tight, okay? Got it. Barely a day later, and he was already back in the car. Mike had made pancakes for the two of them, which had made Izuku feel a bit better, but he still wasn't confident enough to be transformed in public. He took Fuma's identity this time, as it was the least conspicuous, and he didn't need to worry about food or staying alive anymore. Hopefully. He got back to resting his head on the window. He watched Eraserhead, whose name he learned was Shoyuta Aizawa, still talking on the phone. He could only guess what Nedzu was saying on the other end, whoever that was, but the conversation was dead serious. He was glad that his situation wasn't being treated like a joke. Present Mike, whose name was Hisashi Yamada, was the one driving this time. He had put on some fun music at least, to try and lighten the mood, but things were still strained. At the very least, he seemed confident things wouldn't go poorly. Mike, what kind of person is Nedzu? They were stopped at a red light, so Izuku felt it was a good time to ask. He's quite the eccentric one, and trustworthy for sure. But from what I know of him, he'd be upset if I told you anything more. He likes his surprises. The two lapsed into silence again as the light turned green. Izuku felt a bit less worried, knowing that these two thought Nedzu was trustworthy. Eraserhead seemed to be a bit annoyed while talking to him, though. Maybe his personality wasn't a match? He had no way of knowing other than waiting. And wait he did, for quite a while. The red lights were relentless truly, they had it out for the three, since they seemed to hit every one. It was only when their destination came into view that Izuku became nervous once again, spiking when they pulled into a back entrance. We're going into UA? Did I forget to let you know, little listener? Both of us work here, and so does Nedzu, so we're meeting at the school. Oh. Wow, I really get to go to UA of all places. Even if it's not for school, it's always been my dream to go here. Mike smiled at that as he parked the car. Well, with enough hard work, I'm sure you can get in. But let's worry about one thing at a time. Don't want to keep Nedzu waiting. That's for sure. Eraserhead interjected, looking like he was dreading the incoming conversation. Let's just get this over with. As much as I didn't want to have to contact him, this is something he should absolutely know about. That's right. Something popped out of Eraserhead's scarf. Izuku jolted back, and Mike did too, to a lesser extent. Eraserhead just let out a long sigh. Am I a dog, a mouse, or a bear? More importantly, I'm the principal. Izuku recovered from his shock, staring at he'd just think of it as an animal. Are you Nedzu? Correct, Mr. Midoriya. It's a pleasure to meet you. He hopped off of Eraserhead's shoulder. Now, come along you three, we have a meeting room to get to, and one more person to meet. There's someone else waiting for the kid? Yes. I contacted one other person once our call ended, who I believe will have important information as well. You'll meet him very soon. And with that they were off. Nedzu led them down countless winding hallways, to the point where Izuku wasn't sure what floor they were even on anymore. All he knew was, wherever they were going, it had to be very secure. He felt like he was going to go insane, the clicking of shoes against the polished floor sounding in rhythm making his head swim, before Nedzu stopped outside a door. Looking around, He concluded that he had no idea where they were, in some hallway that looked the same as every one before it. Even the door was a carbon copy, but clearly this room was their destination. Izuku wondered how long it would take to look through every room, before stepping through the open door. He almost passed out. The room was pretty standard, looked like a regular meeting room with an oval table and chairs. They even had wheels and were reclinable. Too bad the room was dull and gray. No, what shocked Izuku was the person sitting at the end of the table, awaiting their arrival. It was, well, All Might? Aizawa and Hisashi were taken aback by the volume, since the kid had been pretty reserved up until now, but it was All Might. Superfans were pretty common. Why are you here? Izuku stuttered out as he took a seat across the table. Nedzu sat next to the number one hero, and the other two took spots on either side of Izuku. Nedzu hasn't told me much about the situation, but what I do know is that you, young Midoriya, may have some very important information that I must know. But I'll let Nedzu ask the questions for now. The principal nodded, hopping onto the table to get a better vantage point. Now, Midoriya, I've already been filled in on the situation, so let's cut to the chase. Tell me everything you know about your father. There are some things we need to confirm. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to stop his hands from shaking. All right. I only know about him from what I've overheard and our brief interaction, so I'm sorry if this isn't comprehensive. That's quite all right, young Midoriya. What you know should be enough. Thank you, All Might. I can't believe I get to talk to All Might. Even in this situation, it's still a dream come true. I'll start with what I've overheard. From listening in on Mom's calls, it seems like he will call in to ask about certain people whose quirks he's interested in. I only know this because she likes to repeat the name back to confirm. And then, after that, things will be fine for a few days, and then the person in question will go missing. Izuku bit his lip. Usually they never come back, but if they do, they never use their quirk again. I used to think they were just scared or something, but now, I think he stole it. Nedzu nodded along. All right, and what about your interaction? It wasn't pleasant? He had my doctor take me to his lair, which on its own is terrifying. How did he even plant my doctor of all people? But once I was there, the doctor brought me through what looked like a laboratory to meet him. There were bodies. I don't know if any of them were alive, but there were so many. Izuku put his hand over his mouth. He didn't want to think about them, it made him feel sick. Mike patted his back. It'll be okay, little listener. You're safe now. Just focus on something else. Everyone was looking at him, worried, but he knew he had to keep going. Why yeah. Let me just describe him now. He was sitting up in a hospital bed, hooked up to a ton of machines. I think he had a mask on to help him breathe. And his head, everything above the mouth was horribly scarred, but he was functioning like he wasn't even hurt. He creeped me out when he smiled, too. He was in shadow, though, so it was hard to make out fine details. All Might spoke up. That's all right. What I'm concerned about is if he used his quirk on you. Nedzu told me he offered you a quirk, but did he do anything else? Izuku didn't have to think hard about that one. Yes. When he tried to kill me, his arm, it was like it mutated into this big hulking mass of flesh and metal. All Might muttered something under his breath at that. Izuku couldn't pick it up, but he didn't have to, since the hero asked him another question. While you were there, he leaned forwards, eyes darkening. Did you ever hear the name, All for One? I can't recall, but I can ask the others. He stopped focusing on the meeting room. He could faintly hear All Might asking about the others, and Eraserhead filling him in. Alright you guys. Did any of you hear that name while we were there? I didn't see that name anywhere in the lab, sorry. Cecilia informed him, and Ollie backed her up. Then it had to have been spoken at some point. Fuma guessed. He was the only one who wasn't there, but he still wanted to help. Right, and I'm pretty sure Dad only referred to himself by name. The others hummed in agreement. Then maybe Dr. Tsubasa? Mint supplied. Right, that dude was talking his butt off the whole time, and I remember hearing him panicking as we left. I was focused on directions, though. Jurord mentioned. Narissa suddenly gasped, something connecting for her. Right, I remember now. When you were running off, that doctor shouted a name, and I couldn't quite get what he was trying to say. I was trying to match what he said with a regular name, but now that I think about it, he was saying, Lord All for One, And you're sure that's what he said? Positive. Narissa was confident, not a hint of doubt in her voice. Izuku knew he could trust that. He tuned back into reality, to find All Might looking at him expectantly. He didn't know how to word this, so he just let it tumble out. Narissa said she heard the doctor saying, Lord All for One, as we were fleeing. Is that who you're looking for? Bang. Everyone jumped in their seats. Even Nedzu let out a squeak. All Might had slammed his hands down on the table, hard. He didn't look happy. Aru dash. He lived. I thought I had gotten rid of him for good. All Might's face darkened more, before he sighed, slumping over in his chair. Izuku had never seen the hero look so defeated. He stayed quiet this time, waiting for a response from his idol, and eventually one came. I'm sorry, young Midoriya. I let my anger get the best of me. But now that I know that All for One is still alive, all of you need to be filled in on the situation. Their eyes met. You deserve to know what's going on, after what he's put you through. There was a soft poof, and All Might started emitting smoke? Before Izuku could wrap his mind around what was going on, the smoke cleared to reveal an older man sitting where the hero once was. He had the same hair color, the same eyes, the same, hey. Izuku furrowed his brow, trying to remember something. I know you, don't I? Yes, young Midoriya, we've met once before, at Dagobah. He snapped his fingers. Yes. I remember now, and then he stopped. I was talking to All Might? The man in question laughed, although it wasn't as booming as usual. But, if this is what you really look like, why are you showing us? Yeah, this is news to me. Eraserhead commented. What makes us qualified to know something not even the worst press vulture dug up? Because I've already spilled about All for One, I need to get you up to speed on what he is, and how I'm connected to him. I can't tell you much about myself, but I'll explain what his quirk is and, All Might lifted his shirt. This. It was the nastiest wound any of them had seen. Well, Nezu had already seen it before, but still. His entire left side had been caved in, it was an ugly reddish purple, too. What the? He did this. All Might nodded. 5 years ago, we fought, and I got this injury. I intended to kill him then, and I assumed I had, but now I know he survived. You were trying to kill him? Correct, All Might sighed, a regretful look on his face. I didn't want to kill anyone, and I still don't, but that man. He's lived for a very long time, much longer than anyone should, and he's spent his life killing, manipulating, and hating. If I didn't get rid of him for good, he would eventually come back, like he always has. How is that possible? How long has he been alive? A very long time, young Midoriya. His quirk is called One for All, hence his name, and it allows him to give and take quirks. Aizawa and Hisashi both gasped, and Izuku would have too, if he didn't already have a feeling that was the case. Even with all my power, I was only barely able to win against him, and even then it wasn't enough to truly get rid of him. Now, I'm stuck with an unfixable injury and a big problem. Izuku didn't know how to feel about this. It was a lot to take in, that someone he looked up to, who he thought was untouchable, had this happen to him. He felt even worse that it was the fault of someone he was related to. It's not like he was the cause of the injury, but the guilt ate away at his heart. How bad is the injury on the inside? Aizawa, trying to find out what he could, inquired. Most of my organs near the impact were severely damaged, and my stomach was completely destroyed. Izuku winced. That was really bad. Combined with the damage to my skin and bones, it became impossible to repair without having to take a significant break from heroism, upwards of half a year. There isn't a quirk we know of that could fix it faster without a long recovery time. Understood. All Might sighed, and stood up from his seat. I'm sorry for dragging down the mood. This is just awful news for everyone. And no, don't feel bad, I'm glad you came at all, and that I could be of use. Izuku stood up and bowed, almost 90 degrees. Even if the conversation wasn't happy, it was an honor to speak to you. Likewise, young Midoriya. He transformed back into his muscle form for a brief moment, and gave Izuku a firm handshake. I'm glad to see that you're doing well. I'm sure you'll be safe here at UA. Alright, at UA? I thought Nadzu cut in. Yes, at UA. Since your case is quite a sensitive one, we'll be keeping you on campus. We have plenty of secure rooms under the main building for cases like this, so you won't have to worry about security. This day just kept getting stranger. At least he didn't have to intrude on Eraserhead and mix home anymore. Well then, Midoriya, I suppose we should get going. All Might still has heroics to get to, and I need to get you to your new living space. Nezu hopped off the table, walking out the door. Alright. Izuku hurried after him, but not before turning back to his idol. All Might? I promise that I'll try to help you. I don't know much about my quirk now, but if there's any chance I can fix that wound, I promise I'll help. The hero looked back at him. He didn't look like he had that much faith, but he still put on a smile. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. And then he was alone with Nezu. Aizawa and Hisashi excused themselves shortly after, citing paperwork as their reason to depart. If they were working at UA, though, he figured he would see them again soon. Working at UA, huh? Hey Nezu? How did you get in contact with All Might anyways? He was able to get here so quickly between Eraserhead calling you and us arriving, so. Nezu smiled, almost mischievously. Well, that's because he'll be teaching at UA this coming year, of course. Oh. Izuku blinked. Wait, what? He was laying on the floor of his new room. His room. It was all for him and no one else. He couldn't wipe the smile off his face. Sure, it wasn't anything like the one back at home that he had 15 years to get used to, but that was a good thing. He didn't want to think about that place ever again. It was a more traditional style room, with sliding doors, tatami floors, and everything else he could ask for. One bedroom, one bathroom, and a central area with a small kitchen and living area. He didn't know if he was able to get decorations for the space, but at least it had good cell reception. No idea how, since the whole place was underground, but he didn't question Nezu's genius. He wondered why Nezu took the time to build all this stuff anyways. Money must not be an issue for UA. Speaking of cell phones, though, he got a fresh one. His old one had been dead for ages, but Nezu confiscated it in fear of it being bugged. It was probably going to get scrapped for parts, but whatever. So now he was sitting here, contemplating the situation. He was a ward of UA, apparently the first time that had happened, and was confined to campus. He also had to stay in one of his identities while out of his room, but that was easy. It was fun to use them anyway. It was still morning, but he wasn't confident enough to head out just yet. Maybe he'd just stay in for the day. He could look around later. He needed to get comfortable. Things were going to get better. They already were. He just needed to keep up, and keep improving himself along with, so he wouldn't fall behind, again. Omake 8, paperwork. There was a knock at the door. Izuku opened it, but no one was there? On the ground in front of the door, however, he found a stack of papers and a note. Aizawa asked me to deliver these to you. Sounds like you got quite busy taking down villains, and he wants you to do these so he doesn't have to do as much paperwork for the cases. Throwing paperwork at a child? Really? Can't believe he'd stoop this low. Izuku picked up the papers anyway, setting them on his desk. Why, was the stack so big? There can't possibly be a good reason for this much paper. He barely took down any villains. Just like, 12? Do the cases with multiple suspects count as one, or? Ugh, no use thinking too hard about it. After just a short while, though, he was already feeling the fatigue. There was barely a dent in the stack, and he already felt like he was going to go insane. How long has it been? 5 minutes? He closed his eyes and put his hands together in prayer. Oh Kami, if you can hear me, please send me someone who can help me. I can't do this alone. And, as if to answer his prayers, he felt a shift. From the depths of his mind, she awoke, and descended upon his weary self like an angel, the patron saint of all overworked executives everywhere. Did I leave you waiting? There was another new building in the dreamscape, also attached to the same complex that the lounge and cafe were. It looked like the average apartment building you'd see near the city center, with a large display out front reading, Secret Society Hollow X. Well, not much of a secret, huh? There was a 3F on the display, but it had been scribbled out almost completely. He guessed that the group used to be only on the 3rd floor, but now that they were in the dreamscape, no reason not to lay claim to the whole building. He went up to the 3rd floor anyway. That's probably where the main area was if the sign was anything to go by. He would be more annoyed having to climb 2 sets of stairs if he wasn't able to just will his exhaustion away. There were perks to training in his own mind. For a secret society, the inside was surprisingly cozy. Wood floors, plenty of carpets, couches, chairs, and desks. The place had everything you needed for a hideout. It even had a TV, but Izuku doubted it would actually work. But, well, a lot of the electronics in the cafe worked fine, so there was a chance. He was brought out of his thoughts by the smell of cooking. He hadn't noticed, but there was a kitchen in the corner of the room, and their newest member was at the stove. And the metal stairs clanging with every step had alerted her to his presence, so he just hurried over. You finally got to sleep, huh? Yeah. Paperwork sure is nightmarish. That was something both of them could agree with. Well, I don't think we've been officially acquainted. My name is Takon Louis, the executive of Secret Society Hollow X. Pleased to meet you. You know, like my name. Oh, yeah, no, I figured that out. Just, wasn't sure how to respond. Louis gave him a thumbs up, and turned back to the stove. That's okay. I'm glad to see you're doing well, after all that work. I was just like you when I was new to all that. You get used to it. Izuku didn't really want to get used to paperwork, but it was inevitable. It was quite impressive that you managed to fall asleep at your desk, I dare say. He practically jumped out of his skin as a girl with a katana basically materialized next to him. She'd been behind him the whole time, in truth, but she was an expert at stealth. And he fell asleep at his desk? He hadn't even noticed. Ah, right. Izuku, this is Kazama Iroha, Hollow X's bodyguard. And, how did she get here? You see, Iroha began, puffing up her chest. Your mind is quite the confusing maze, Izuku, and and then she deflated a bit. I got lost and ended up here. Izuku just had to accept the strangeness. That makes no sense at all, which means it must be true. Either way, it's nice to meet you. He stuck out his hand, and Iroha shook it with fervor. I 2 a.m. in this episode. And there was Ollie as well. Why did people keep sneaking up on Izuku? How did Ollie of all people manage to sneak up on him? The world may never know, but what it did know is that Izuku almost jumped out of his skin again. More due to the volume this time. This is terrible for my heart. Go easy on me, okay? He got ignored. You guys know that this secret society isn't really a secret, right? Ollie was saying the quiet part out loud. She tended to do that, though. Louis started to respond, before stopping. He saw a dangerous glint in her eyes. Iroha. Now that she knows our secret, don't let her leave here alive. Iroha drew her blade from the scabbard. Izuku stepped back, not keen on getting chopped up. Ollie suddenly looked like she was regretting her life choices. I will cut you down, I dare say. Eek. The two of them ran up the stairs and out of the building, and he could hear a flurry and slashing and shrieking from outside. Louis just went back to cooking. I'm not gonna end up like her, right? HM? Oh, no, not at all. That was just giving Iroha something fun to do. And you're pretty much our 6th member anyways, since our founder would no doubt approve of you. What's your founder like? Because I'm not sure if I'm a good fit for a secret society. Well, our founder is, Louis stopped stirring the pot, staring into space. She had an unreadable expression. Why can't I remember? I know they were important to me, but, who were they? He'd seen this before. Not a lot of the others talked about it, but he remembered all the times where his friends had been unable to recall the people they cared about, and this was no exception. He placed a hand on her shoulder, shaking her out of her stupor. You shouldn't worry too much. It's happened before, with everyone, but there is a silver lining. Louis looked a little more hopeful. It means that whoever you can't remember is here, as one of those blurry figures. We figured that out when Cecilia got here, since Nerissa was able to remember one of the gaps in her memory. So, whoever they are, you'll meet them eventually. Given he survived that long, of course, but he wasn't about to say that part. Not now. Louis sighed. Let's hope so. He took a seat at the kitchen table, and they lapsed into silence. Unfortunately, he only got a few minutes of it, before Ollie and Iroha came bursting back into the hideout, with everyone else in tow. Oh hey Ollie. We're back and we brought friends. And we are going to have a sleepover, I dare say. The two of them looked like they were having a blast. Izuku looked at Louis, who just shrugged, a smile on her face. Well, sleepovers are fun, so he wasn't complaining. Everyone piled into the hideout, finding seats at chairs, on couches, or on the ground. Nerissa and Fuma were carrying a mountain of blankets between them. Mint had brought her tea set and a bunch of tea leaves, all of which were floating. Jurard somehow found a way to drag his giant whiteboard up 2 flights of stairs, and Cecilia brought a stack of books, likely for herself. Ollie wormed her way into the kitchen, trying to convince Louis to let her help cook, and Izuku decided to leave them to it and help set up. A couple hours later, Izuku was under the covers with a good book and a cup of tea, surrounded by his friends. The group had had dinner earlier, even if it wasn't able to actually fill their stomachs on account of being in his mind. It still tasted great, though. Jurard, Cecilia, Fuma, and Iroha were all playing games on the TV together, and the others were either napping or reading. Mint had been reading next to him, but had fallen asleep a little while ago and was now just a weight on his shoulders, literally. It looked like whatever game they were playing was winding down as well. Maybe he should go join them for the next round? But the book is just getting good. So many options? Everyone was under the covers and the lights were off. Nerissa had roped him into her and Louis' girl talk. He didn't really get it, but apparently he needed to get used to it, according to the two. He sure was learning a lot about skincare, though. He wished he had his notebook right about now, but whatever he wrote in here wouldn't magically appear in his real notes. He had a weird quirk, but it wasn't that incomprehensible. He still needed to get a new quirk test, though. He hadn't officially learned what his quirk was, so he'd like a new diagnosis at some point, even if it didn't have anything new. Alright. Time to focus and absorb as many tips as possible before he fell asleep. This pillow is so comfy. Morning already. Izuku took a stretch. Well, you can wake up whenever you'd like, of course, but you should do it soon. Izuku looked around, and saw most of the others waking as well. Mint, who had just been speaking, was picking up her tea supplies, and he saw Louis in the kitchen putting the cookware into the dishwasher. He got up and headed over to help out. Clean up time? Yeah, Louis looked tired, but had accepted her fate. I usually did all the managerial stuff around the hideout, so I know how it goes. By yourself? By myself. Izuku smiled. Well, now that you're here with us, we'll all help you. I'm sure everyone will be happy to pitch in, and they're all gone. Izuku looked back at the group to see a distinct lack of said group. Just a lot of blankets and mess. A tumbleweed blew across the room. He turned back to Louis, a tear trickling down his cheek. We means just me, I guess. Let's get started, then. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Izuku would look over every so often, and Louis had an unreadable expression on her face. At one point, she just stopped completely, staring off into space. He had to do something. What's going on? Is there something bothering you? I can't remember them at all. It shouldn't be affecting me this much, but Izuku could tell she was shaken up. He had seen the others get like this before, and he wished he could do more to help them. We were so close, I remember that. They were everything to me. I wish I had friends like that. I never got the chance to get close to people. Louis patted his head. You'll find someone someday. And, from my experience, they'll show up faster than you think, I promise. I hope so. And I promise that we'll find your friends eventually. That way, none of us have to be alone. All right, then I'm counting on you. Louis grinned, back in good spirits. Don't let me down, now. I'll do my best. Cleaning with Louis had been fun, at least. Iroha eventually showed back up to help as well, after following everyone outside and getting lost in Cecilia's lounge. But now it was being awake time, and Izuku had to figure out what to do. He didn't want to stay cooped up in his room, so he was wandering around UA, after spending almost 15 minutes trying to get out of Nedzu's maze basement. He'd woken up still in Louis' identity, and she fit in well enough that he didn't bother changing back. Also, the cloak was cool. He was unsure what areas were off limits to him, but he knew he wasn't stepping foot anywhere near the classrooms, since it was a Monday and he didn't want to run into students. That also meant he couldn't see the support labs, which bummed him out a bit, but he didn't let it get him down. It wasn't like his wandering was totally random, though. He wanted to get some training in so he could learn how to move right in Louis and Iroha's identities, and use their weapons and abilities, as well as brush up on some of the others as well. He knew UA had some big gym areas he could use, he just had to find them. Was it this building? Nope, this is a storage shed. I don't know why I thought this was big enough. Was it this bigger building? This one is full of chairs. And desks. And whiteboards. How about this really long building? There's a plane in this one. Wait, Izuku squinted to see towards the dimly lit back of the hangar. I think there's more than one. Wow. Perhaps, this one looked like it was the right size to be a gym. Izuku opened the door. Here we go, nope. That's a stage. He could hear Narissa squeal with joy. Filing that away for later. Maybe it was this one said Gym Beta in massive letters on the side. How did I miss that? In the heat of passion, one can miss many a detail obvious otherwise, I dare say. Iroha proudly declared. I wouldn't say I was, whatever. We found it, that's what matters. He stepped inside, clicking the door shut behind him. The lights whirred to life, detecting his presence immediately. Looking around at the place, he noticed it was rather populated by training dummies in various states of disrepair. Some just looked beat up, others looked like they had been ripped straight out of the ground, and a couple had bites taken out of them? Izuku didn't want to find out who did those, but he was happy to have targets. So, what first? I would start by practicing with Hawkeye. It'll let you lock onto targets and hit them easier. Auto-aim, sure would be nice to be able to use that with Jurud's guns, but you can't have everything. At least it'll help you guarantee hits with my whip. But you'll still need to learn the proper technique, or your hits will have no power. Izuku thought he had it figured out by now. Target the dummies with Hawkeye and strike with the whip. Easy peasy. He leaned against a nearby dummy, thinking of how to activate Hawkeye, and bumped some sort of button on its chest. Suddenly, every dummy in the room was looking at him. I don't like this. You should run, I dare say. Izuku ran. The dummies did too. Oh Kami, I've made a terrible mistake. Just focus on hitting them. Louis shouted, and Izuku wished he could. In the heat of the moment, Hawkeye started working, and he saw a crosshair appear on the closest dummy. Grabbing the whip from his waist, he struck. It bounced off harmlessly. Izuku made an incomprehensible noise and went back to running away. Izuku, you swung it too hard. Louis chimed in. He tried his best to focus on her words. You need force for sure, but it needs to be in a smooth, fluid motion. You panicked, and it didn't come out right. Got it. I'll try again. A dummy moved in to intercept him from the front, and he raised the whip again. He focused on the head, and swung down. A loud crack echoed through the gym as it broke the speed of sound, creating a significant dent in the dummy's head, which promptly fell over. Yes. 1 out of, let's not think about the numbers right now. Perhaps you could try deactivating them? Somehow Iroha was the voice of reason this time. Louis hummed in agreement. Izuku looked at the wildly swinging arms of the dummies and decided he didn't want to get close. Well, you did say the Hawkeyes are good at locking onto targets. He narrowed his eyes, honing in on the button on one of the nearby dummies. Once he had it targeted, he swung yet again. The crack sounded again, and he heard a loud beep. The dummy's arm clattered to the floor, and the button depressed. And everything was still. Izuku laid down on the floor, catching his breath. Never again. You should look where you lean, I dare say. No kidding. Let's stick to stationary targets for now. A few hours of practice later, and he was getting better at using the whip. He had the wrist movements and the fluid swings down, so he was just trying for faster cracks and more damage. Hawkeye was pretty easy to master, since it was just auto-aim, but he probably needed to work on using it on groups. He wasn't able to target more than one dummy at a time just yet. Was he going to get hearing damage from this? Kaken's blasts made his ears ring, but this wasn't really the same. I'm getting pretty good at this. This is the easy part, though. And there goes his confidence. If you want to truly master the whip, there's a long way to go. Yeah. You'll have to train for 100 years before you can match our executive. He was a bit worried about that. Maybe I can rely a bit on muscle memory? Don't listen to her, Izuku. You're already picking it up a lot faster than I did, and I'll be here to mentor you. It'll still take a while, but you can do it. Izuku sat down on the concrete floor. Break time. He had caved in the heads of quite a few dummies, and he was silently hoping Nedzu had some way to repair them. Otherwise he would feel pretty bad about damaging them that much. He heard a click, and the door to the gym creaked open. He shot to his feet, and in walked 3 students, one blonde, one with curly blue hair, and one with darker blue hair and a noticeable slump. They looked over at him. He looked back. I need to get into character. The blonde guy stepped forwards first, a smile on his face. He kinda looked like a younger All Might. He stuck out his hand for Izuku, and he shook it, not wanting to come off as rude. We weren't expecting company. And it seems you've already done a number on some of the training dummies. Yes, I did. I'm Takon Louis, nice to meet you. He looked over the boy's shoulder at his friends. The dark-haired one averted his gaze, and the blue-haired girl waved, matching the blonde's enthusiasm. Nice to meet you as well. I'm Mirio Togata, and those two are Nijire Hato. He pointed at the blue-haired girl, who waved back yet again, and Tamaki Amajiki. He moved to point at the other boy, who almost shrank under his gaze. They seemed nice enough. Well, I'm glad we could get acquainted, but I should get out of your hair. I wouldn't want to bother you while you train. Izuku stepped past the 3 and out the gym doors. Mirio went to say something, but Nijire grabbed his shoulder and let the door shut behind him. In truth, he would have loved to hang out, but his nerves got the best of him. He was lucky to keep himself from stuttering, honestly. Maybe that was Louis' influence? I pride myself on my public speaking, the woman in question spoke. So you may have picked up some of that confidence. It's not like that hasn't happened before, picking up some personality traits. It's always been easier for me to match how you guys act. Lucky. Maybe he should come back tomorrow. He did need to get some training in with Iroha, so perhaps he could try running into them again. He did, in fact, show up the next day. Same place, same time. The dummies were back in working order again, to his relief, but he wasn't intent on turning them on anytime soon. Right now was katana practice. He had a bit of regular sword practice using the one stuck in Ollie's head, but a katana was going to be more complicated to use. So he swung, and swung, and swung, and swung a little more. They didn't even get to hitting the dummies, since Iroha was so adamant on him perfecting his stance before that. He was almost ready to graduate from air slicing when in came the 3 from yesterday. He had a feeling. They would show up, at the same time too, but he didn't know their schedule. What kind of creep looks up people's schedules? He could see the one with dark hair. Amajiki? Yeah, that guy. He saw him shrink when their eyes met, and mutter something to the other two. Well, time to get out of here again. The blonde, Mirio, walked up again to introduce himself and the other two. Izuku wasn't paying attention really. He already knew who they were, they just didn't realize it was him again. No, he was thinking that he had forgotten the way back. It seemed that he had gained Iroha's poor sense of direction. Great. He bowed to the group, sheathing his katana. I apologize for intruding upon your training site, I dare say. I will leave with haste. And then he saw himself out. He heard the girl, Nijire, say something about him being a character, which he couldn't deny. How much longer could he mess with these two before they got suspicious? On Wednesday he went to brush up with Ollie. He got beat up by the dummies, but at least it didn't hurt that bad. Seeing the three get spooked by a zombie with a big sword stuck in her head made it all better though. Round 3 of introductions came and went, and he left them to it again. He was waiting for when they'd call him out. The 4th day was target practice. He sat on one side of the room, putting bullets in skulls with Jurud. Not real skulls, of course. He wasn't sure what the dummies were made of, but they were quite tough. He was very careful not to shoot the 3 when they came knocking for the 4th time, but they didn't just let him leave. What's going on? This is the 4th day in a row that there's been someone training here. It's usually empty. Mirio, seemingly the leader from what Izuku had gathered, was the first one to confront him. Well, it's free to use, isn't it? I mean, yes, but it almost never sees any use. And now 4 people I've never seen on campus before show up back to back? It's weird. Hato interjected. Shouldn't we introduce ourselves before we start bothering him? Amajiki looked horrified to have to do that for the 4th time. I'll go first, I'm Dash. I know who you are. Izuku stopped her there. It would be no fun to keep playing hard to get. Is that how you describe what he's doing? Amajiki breathed a sigh of relief, before a look of concern crossed his face. Why you know us? He wasn't about to beat around the bush, so he just transformed on the spot into Louis. The 3 jolted back. Sorry, but I've been messing with you since the start. It's been me the whole time. He was definitely enjoying the shocked looks on their faces. Nijire walked up to him, grabbing both his hands. So cool. So all of those people were you? Yeah. Izuku was not expecting her so close to his face. That means your quirk must be pretty versatile. You were doing so many things each time we met you. Mirio had a beaming smile on his face once again. Aha, you can stop with the flattery now. But, which one is the real you? Izuku grinned at that, turning his gaze to the boy, who shrank down again. You'll have to figure that one out. It's no fun if I just tell you. Obviously he was lying here, but it would be fun to see what they guessed. They peppered him with even more questions, especially from Nijire, to the point he couldn't answer them all. Sometimes he couldn't answer them because it was confidential, but he was able to keep up for the most part. Despite how interesting they were, though, he didn't want to cut into their training time anymore, so he tried excusing himself yet again. I should really get out of your way, though, so Dash. No, wait. Mirio placed his hand on Izuku's shoulder. You aren't in our way at all. We'd love to have you here while we train. Izuku looked over at Amajiki, who was facing the wall. Even him? Mirio sighed. I'm sure if you two get acquainted, he'll warm up to you. Just don't overwhelm him. I can do that. He walked over to the boy, taking Fuma's form since it was the simplest and least likely to overwhelm. He also made sure to slow down his speech. Are you okay if I stay a while longer? Tamaki slowly turned towards him. Izuku could see the unease on his face, but he took a deep breath and seemed to calm down. Why yeah. If Mirio can do it, I can too. That's great. Oh, and can you tell me about your quirk? I'd love to study it. Izuku didn't know much about them, but he remembered the damage from the first day and was just so curious about their quirks. But he may have come on a bit too strong. Amajiki slammed his head back against the wall. Izuku winced. Let's try that again. Their quirks were crazy cool. Izuku was so busy taking notes that he almost forgot to get in some practice himself. He had swapped him in to work on her other power that he hadn't worked with until now, telekinesis. It was limited, and he dropped things a lot, but he was using it to fetch the dummies that Nijire blasted across the room, or that Mirio punched across the room. He was glad that Tamaki wasn't throwing things across the room. He was just ripping them to shreds. Scary. He didn't know if they could be counted as friends yet, but it seemed he was welcome to train with them in the future. Maybe he could make his first real friend since Kaken? And since he wasn't really friends with him anymore, they'd be his only friends too. Other than the ones in his head, but did they count as friends, or as parts of himself? He decided to think about that later. Maybe he was putting too many things off for later, but he still didn't have a good grasp of what exactly his quirk was. He needed to ask Nedzu for another quirk test, and see if that could tell him anything. Omake 9, playing favorites? It's gotta be me. No way, it's totally me. Well, I was the first, so it should naturally be me. Izuku walked in on an argument brewing. He sat down next to Mint, who was watching from the sidelines. What's going on? You said one of them was the real you, so they're arguing over who it is. They know I'm joking, right? Probably. Mint shrugged. But it's fun to guess. And everyone loves being the favorite. I dare say, perhaps it is me. Iroha joined in, followed by Fuma shortly after. Mint poked him in the side. So, between me and you, I'm the favorite, right? Izuku sighed. Even Mint wasn't immune to it, despite how unconcerned she tried to look. Friday had been a bit different from the previous days. He was officially invited back to Gym Beta this time, instead of just showing up out of nowhere. He had also planned on actually getting to know his new friends, since he had just bothered them with quirk-related questions the whole time the day before. He still didn't even know what class they were in, that's how distracted he got. But he had been determined this time to learn more about them. But, the day just blurred by. He got some practice with Narissa, and he was able to ask some of his questions, but he didn't want to get in the way of their practice. In his head he knows it's okay to approach, but he just can't bring himself to. Not yet, not now. Maybe he could find them outside of class one day, but it's a bit late for that. He can look back on yesterday all he wants, but now it's the weekend, and he has unlocked free roam. The entire area of the school where classes are held is wide open for exploration, and it's big. So many large open spaces for heroics classes he can, and probably would, get lost in, along with every classroom, support room, etc. Decision paralysis would probably kick in soon, so Izuku just picked a direction and walked. He was quickly realizing an annoying design flaw that Nedzu seemed to make. Why did everything look the same? Everywhere. All the hallways, all the doors, all the rooms, they were identical. Probably to cut on costs. This place is big. Fuma helpfully pointed out. His money isn't infinite. Oh. Duh. Sometimes it feels like it is, though? When in doubt, copy-paste. Seemed to be the motto of the architect, but Izuku was getting the hang of it. While it was easy to get lost, once he knew one floor plan, he knew them all. But the building he was in had only regular classrooms, and that was boring, so he left for somewhere else. After a bit more wandering, he found the support labs. Probably the most interesting place to be when no one else was here. Large building. Huge. Not just in height, but it covered a huge area of the grounds as well. He peeked inside, and figured out why it was so large. There were hundreds of massive robots, stacked up to the ceiling. This place must be producing them, in addition to being a place for support course students to work. If he looked far enough inside he could see stations for people to work on smaller projects, so he headed over. Took him a couple minutes to even reach them, though. He could see a figure as he approached. For a moment his heart leaped, and he was scared he'd messed up the date, and he was intruding, but it was just Power Loader, working on who knows what at a workstation. He slowed his steps, intending to be a bit of a menace. Whatcha up to? Gah! The hero jolted, luckily not holding anything dangerous, and whipped around. Oh, it's just you, Midoriya? Don't scare me like that. HM? You know who I am already? He was in Fuma's identity currently, so being recognized wasn't high on his list of expectations. Nedzu filled me in. He told all of us about you and your quirk, so you don't need to worry about being recognized. I see. Just, don't use my real name please. That'll cause problems. Right, yeah. Power Loader turned back to what he was working on. It looked to Izuku like a piece of scrap, but who was he to judge? I'm trying to repair this piece of support gear one of my students broke. Ah, it really was scrap. Even still. I guess I should leave you to it, then. It's okay if I wander around, right? Power Loader looked around the room, before nodding. Yeah. Just don't touch anything if you don't know how it works. Which should be most things. Don't touch anything. Got it, I'll be careful. Izuku saw himself out, wandering into the belly of the beast. That being a mess of blueprints, metal, and wiring that was pretending to be a lab. He wondered how anyone got anything done here. He sure wouldn't be able to. He left that area with haste. At least the open floor plan made it easy to look around, and there sure was a lot to see. He passed by a robotics area full of similarly broken gadgets, a clothing area with all sorts of cloth, spandex, and assorted materials laid out, a whole bunch of shelves of 3D printers, some material sciences area with what looked like hazardous chemicals, and more. But none of it really struck him until the metalworking lab. There was a massive forge in the center, surrounded by anvils, saws, casts, and a multitude of other tools for working with metals and other crystalline objects. Normally he wouldn't be too intrigued by it, but something was screaming to him to look deeper. Or rather, someone. Whoever you are, can you please stop squealing? It's way too loud. Are you kidding? This is the most beautiful forge I've ever seen, how could I not be excited? Okay. Can I get a name, at least? Ah, right, I almost forgot. The voice, like many others, had jumped to bothering Izuku before he even knew who they were. They cleared their throat, calming themselves. I'm Kayla Kowalskia, the coolest blacksmith from Hololive ID. A blacksmith. I guess it makes sense why you're here then. Now, without further ado, would you let me use the forge? Things don't work that way. The best I can do is forge something ASU. Kayla clicked her tongue and pouted. Izuku felt a little bad, but she probably had manifested a forge back in the dreamscape, so she could probably get back to work with time. But, Hololive again? He remembered Nerissa had brought it up when they first spoke, and a few of the others could recall it. What was it, exactly? He had some guesses based on the name, but it didn't exist as far as he could tell. Well, whatever. He wanted to see what Kayla was like, first off, and maybe mess around in the metalworking area. Power loader was nowhere to be found, so maybe a little touching wouldn't hurt. Metalworking was fun. Maybe it was just using Kayla's identity, but he found it enjoyable to sweat under the heat of the forge, carefully sculpting the metal until it fit his standards. And he picked it up quickly, with Kayla's guidance. It's not like what he made was amazing quality, but it was a start. But the real interesting part was when he dropped what he was working on by accident. It was complicated too, and he really didn't want to remake it. Don't worry, my apprentice, I have just the solution. First, grab your hammer. Izuku took the hammer he had set on the anvil in his hands. Next, raise it high above your head, and call upon the artisan spirits. What? Just do it. Izuku shrugged, raising the hammer and closing his eyes tight. He wasn't sure how to call upon spirits, so he just mentally asked for them to help. Glowing streaks of light gathered in his hammer, making it glow a bright yellow as the spirits responded to his call. Of course, he had no idea since his eyes were closed. And finally, strike down on the broken object. And he swung, crashing the hammer into the shards. Instead of shattering, like any other object would upon taking a blunt force hit, they shuddered, before sticking onto each other, slowly building themselves back into their previous state. Eventually, sitting on his anvil like nothing happened, was his project, in perfect working order. Suddenly, he could feel the fatigue from working for so long hit him. It's back to normal. This is something machines can't do. Kayla sounded pretty smug about that, but Izuku couldn't blame her. It was a pretty cool power. But, what's up with this silly-looking drawing? It's one of my seals. Proof that I worked on it. Oh, like a trademark. Got it. I thought I told you not to touch anything. He heard a booming voice from across the room. Power loader was incoming, and fast. Izuku couldn't help but sweat, and not because of the heat. He was accosted and physically abused by the man. Translation, he got scolded and received a head chop, hanging his head in shame as he was lectured about the dangers of an open flame and being overall inexperienced. He was right, of course, but Izuku didn't want to admit he was wrong. I'm sorry, I won't do it again, promise. Not without permission. Power loader sighed. If you want to use the facilities, just ask. I have to make sure you're qualified, and you know the safety rules, and all that. Really? You'll let me keep going? How long will the training take? If you have free time this afternoon, we can do it now. Izuku did not, in fact, have free time. He actually had something scheduled, unbelievably. Nedzu had forced him into therapy sessions on Saturdays, so his afternoon was full. And in fact, he glanced over at the clock and realized he barely had any time left before it started. Actually, I gotta go. He dashed off. Let's do that another day. Power loader waved him goodbye as he bolted off. He had about 20 minutes to get across campus. Was that enough time? No idea. He needed a faster way to get there, just to be safe. Alright guys, if any of you have a way to get there faster, now's the time to chime in. No one had a good answer, though. Mint's ghost mode, as he had decided to call it, would let him fly for a short time, but he'd get nauseous and it would just be worse overall. Louis also mentioned that she could fly, but he didn't get a clear answer on how, so he couldn't do that either. His best option ended up being Iroha, who was the lightest on her feet, and using her identity he charged ahead. 10 minutes. 5 minutes. 3. 2. With 1 minute left until the session, he arrived at the door, out of breath. He slumped down onto the chair outside, completely sore. Note to self, keep better track of time. The door opened, and Izuku looked up. Hound Dog looked down at him, before quickly ushering him in. He looked a lot more put together than what Izuku had seen on TV. Instead of the hero gear, he was wearing some business casual clothes, looking more just like a regular civilian with a mutation quirk than a pro hero. And, were those tiny spectacles? Izuku lay down on the couch. He was still tired, and he'd heard that people lay down in therapy rooms before. Not that he'd ever been. Feel free to relax, Midoriya. It's better if you're comfortable. Izuku sunk deeper into the couch, content to surround himself with soft fabric. Now, I'm going to start with a diagnosis, which may sound strange, but it's something I'm required to do. As your quirk involves multiple unique personalities that can operate outside of your control, I have to diagnose you with dissociative identity disorder. That got Izuku's attention. He sat up a bit. Is that something I should be worried about? In your case, no. All it means is that every time we meet I'll ask you how your relationship with them is, and if things are going well, it won't come up. I've been informed that your quirk doesn't control your behavior, so for you all that will matter is whether you get along with them. Speaking of which, do you feel like you have a good relationship with them currently? Oh, we get along great. They're my first real friend since Izuku's face fell, since my diagnosis. Hound Dog reached under his desk, handing Izuku a little dog plushie. You don't have to talk about the past today if you don't feel comfortable. No. I really should. I don't really know what to say, though. My life before all this craziness these past few months wasn't all that interesting. Was there anything or anyone in particular that stood out to you? Kaken. He responded immediately. There was only really one answer, apart from his family. He's gonna be a great hero next year. I don't doubt he'll get into UA. But he wasn't the nicest to me. Izuku sighed, sinking into the couch again and squishing the plushie. I really thought I was starting to get through to him, but I don't think I ever had a chance to begin with. I think he always looked down on me. There wasn't anything I could do to change that. Because of your quirkless diagnosis? Izuku nodded silently. And did he ever bully you for it, or was it just passive resentment? Of course he bullied me, everyone in Aldera did. There wasn't anything I could do about it, though. If I ever stood up for myself, I just got beat back down again. No point, really. Hound Dog sighed to himself. I hope you know you won't face any of that here. We're a very inclusive school. I hope so. He looked down. I don't really have any more to say about him, though. He made it very clear that he wanted to cut ties, so I don't want to try and hang on to a failed relationship. That's a good mindset to have. Holding on to the past never helped anyone. What's important is to confront it and learn from it. I feel like I've already learned my lesson with Kaken. I should probably go back to calling him Bakugo, now that I think about it. I'm not trying to be close anymore. Izuku shook his head. I guess the other important thing from my past was my family. I still don't know if Mom and Itsuki are actually villains like Dad. Is there even anything to learn from that? It feels like I just got unlucky. Hound Dog looked contemplative for a moment. Did they treat you differently? Yeah. Especially Mom. They left me out of almost everything, any mistake I made was a nightmare. Izuku clutched the plush tighter. And those mistakes always lead to beatings. They wouldn't torment me on purpose, it was like I just didn't exist unless they had a problem with me. Honestly, I barely existed for Itsuki at all. He just ignored my presence all the time, but it was better than what Mom did. Right. He heard the scratching of pencil on paper. Izuku wasn't sure how Hound Dog was even able to hold a pencil with those paws. Must just be experience. You're a lot more open about this than most. Do you feel like you've come to terms with what happened? I think so. I understand that I was destined to be treated worse for being quirkless. It's just something I have to accept. That doesn't make it right, though. No child deserves to be treated worse than others for how they were born. That's not what they thought. Just because they're wrong doesn't mean you have to accept it as what is bound to happen. Hound Dog leaned forwards in his chair. If you think something is wrong, don't just lie down and accept it. Izuku laughed, but it was hollow. Well, what do I even do about it? I'm just one kid, I have no influence. As long as you don't fall into self-doubt or let people treat you like they used to, you'll be alright. You don't need to do something grand, or suddenly change the world. Just take one step forward, for yourself. Change takes time, and you have plenty. Izuku rolled over. That required confidence he didn't have. Sure, he could act like the others when he used their identities, but he wasn't really all that. Just a pale imitation. Easily picked apart. Just another thing to add to the list of what to work on. He curled in on himself. We can talk about something else if you'd like. Izuku stayed silent. How's UA treating you? I heard you made a couple friends. He perked up at that, and began excitedly recounting the week and the events leading up to their meeting. Honestly, he was just glad to talk about something positive. All this talk about his past was really getting him down. Hound Dog was starting to get a better picture of how Midoriya's mind worked. It was still rather unclear, but as he watched the boy animatedly explain his training, he started to piece things together. He wasn't all that different from some other teenage boys he'd spoken with, but there were a few notable differences. What struck him the most was how the boy slipped back into character as he spoke. It didn't seem to be a conscious decision, but his speech patterns gradually changed to fit the samurai persona he was inhabiting. That behavior is what tipped him off to something else he had noticed. When he had asked Midoriya about his week, his mood flipped on its head. He went from downcast to cheery in moments. That wasn't normal, especially for someone as young as him, but now wasn't the time to confront him. It wasn't all bad, though. He seemed to have a fantastic relationship with the others in his head, something not a lot of people with a conscious quirk could say, and he was surprisingly comfortable when changing forms. Often, people with transformation quirks that changed their body as significantly as his would experience some amount of dysphoria, but he seemed to acclimate to his new forms with ease. It was still worth looking into to find out why, but one less thing to worry about was always a good thing. He wrote down a few other notes about his general mental state during the meeting, and then it was over. He ushered the boy out the door, reminding him of their meeting next Saturday, and sat back in his chair. Legally he couldn't talk about anything from their meeting, but he was going to talk to Nedzu at some point about a few things not explicitly mentioned in the meeting, just for some more context. Getting more details about his quirk and his old school, just background details that would help him piece together a more accurate picture of his life. But that could come later. He wasn't about to spend the rest of his Saturday at UA, he had a life to live. And he didn't get paid on weekends when he wasn't doing sessions anyways? Well, now what should he do? His schedule was back to being clear, but when he went back to the support labs, Power Loader was nowhere to be found. No safety training today, it seems. But, he wasn't here, HM? Maybe he could do a little more forging, if he was sneaky about it. Don't even think about it. A voice rang out from the speakers above his head. Nedzu? You were watching? I'm always watching. Now, don't go against Power Loader's wishes even if he's gone, or I'll have to let him know. Izuku froze up. You understood. The PA system clicked off. He let out a breath. Okay, no touching. I promise I've learned my lesson. I still want to find out more about what you can do, Kayla, but I guess I can't do anything hands-on. Well, there's not much more to what I can do than what you already know. No matter what you throw at me, I can make it all. Whatever's broken, no matter the material, I'll fix it so you'd never know it was broken. That's all there is to it. No matter the material? I thought you were a blacksmith, but can you work with stuff beyond metals? Of course. I'm not just a blacksmith, I'm an artisan, so it's natural that I can work with anything. Metal, wood, plastic, acrylic, even people. People? Izuku was pretty sure even artisans didn't make people, but maybe Kayla was a special kind of artisan. Well, Kayla sounded a bit sheepish. I'll admit that I don't have the most experience, but with the artisan spirits, I'm sure I could fix a person. But people are harder to work with than other materials, so it would take more energy. The artisan spirits aren't magic, all I do is lend my energy to them. So it's not really a cheat code, then. Still, I want to see if that really works. Izuku glanced over at the desk he was standing near. He picked up a small knife from it, making sure it wasn't rusty or anything, and pricked his finger. Nothing too painful, just enough to check how it worked. Then, grabbing the hammer off his hip, he raised it up. Channeling the artisan spirits was easier the second time, for sure. He struck his finger, and was surprised to find that it didn't hurt at all. Hurt to hit it with the hammer, that is. And then he watched. The thing that stuck out the most was watching the blood that had already dripped out SCK itself back in his finger as the wound closed. It felt weird, for sure, but it was cool to watch. Afterwards, though, he did feel more tired. Not too much, since it was only a pinprick, but it was noticeable. Try not to overuse the spirits. The best part of forging is the process, so you wouldn't want to miss out. Izuku could get behind that. Whenever he did sketches in his notebooks, the process of drawing was really rewarding. It wouldn't be the same if he just took a picture, or had something else make the drawing for him. You'll have to teach me everything you know then, sensei? I'd be happy to pass my knowledge on to you, Pemelo. HM? What's that mean? Kayla paused for a second, trying to recall. I remember now, it means hammer wielder. Also, it means introvert, so it fits you well. I promise I'm getting better at being around people. But you seem like the type to recharge your battery in private instead of with others, so you still count as an introvert. Okay, I get it. Izuku was trying to get better at socializing and making friends, and, you get it. But he still needed his alone time. It made him wonder why he got a quirk that gave him friends that never left, but that was a question that had no answer. Quirks are strange and incomprehensible in their manifestation, but they sure are cool to analyze anyways. But enough about his own problems. If Kayla could fix people, could she fix All Might? Maybe not in this state, if using the artisan spirits requires energy, but if he improved his stamina? All the artisan spirits need to work is the broken object and the materials required to fix it, right? Correct. I can't fix something if it's not there, and I can't manifest material from nowhere, but that's all I need. Then I need to get back to training myself. If I want to help All Might, I can't let myself stagnate, and if I want to be a real strong hero, I can't let my own weakness be the bottleneck. He couldn't see, but from the way she spoke, he could tell Kayla was proud. Then you'd better get started now. Give me 5 laps around UA, and we'll see where to go from there. Izuku shot to his feet, and instinctively saluted. I'm on it, sensei. I'll make 10 business partners. So you're a blacksmith, That I am. Would you like to commission me? Yatagami Fuma leaned against the door to the forge. Not quite. I'm here for a business proposal. See, I do odd jobs, but they don't rack up the most money. But now that you're here, I feel we could put together a partnership. You make the goods, and I'll market and sell them. Kayla narrowed her eyes. What's my cut? What do you think of 70 to 30? You get 70%, of course. 75 to 25 and we have a deal. Fuma reached out his hand. Kayla took it, and they shook, setting the deal in stone. You two know the Dreamscape doesn't have any money, right? Izuku commented, who had been watching Kayla forge until the interruption. On second thought. If there's no money, then I guess I'll just make you something for free. I was just wrapping this one up anyways. I'd like that. Do you do statues?
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.